Hello, greetings and welcome to this webinar on what's new in RAD Studio 11 Alexandria, the next generation of Delphi and C++ builder. My name is Jim McKeith, developer advocate here at Embarcadero, and joining me are both Marco Cantu and David Millington here at Embarcadero. This is a replay of the original launch webinar and does include at the end a recording of the 3 Q&A sessions. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Marco Cantu.
Thanks, Jim. I'm Marco Cantu, and before getting to RAD Studio 11, I want to spend a little time introducing the landscape we are into. I'm going to highlight 3 specific trends out of many that I could pick. And these trends also explain what we are doing with RAD Studio in this release. The first is the coming release of Windows 11 that's scheduled for October. We are fully focused on it, and it was a key reason for picking version 11 as the number of RAD Studio. We are also focused on the technology around Windows 11, specifically supporting the new APIs that Microsoft is working on, collectively known as Windows App SDK, and in the past, Project Reunion. It's a set of APIs and platforms we have been supporting already in some extent and will continue working towards. Another big transition is the ARM CPUs on the desktop. While multiple vendors are working in this direction, Apple has taken a big leap with macOS. Since last year, all of the new macOS devices have an ARM CPU. Having native support for this new CPU is a key element of development environment that wants to target Apple macOS. Now, the last trend I want to mention is the fact that most developers and a very large number of end users have high-resolution monitors, often even 4K monitors, and at times even higher resolution than that. It is important for a development tool to have great support for high resolution, and that's another of the trends that we have been working on over recent years and pushing forward in RAD 11. I want to spend 1 minute reminding what is great in RAD Studio and what makes the product distinct from other development tools. RAD Studio is great for developer productivity. It really lets you build applications faster. It offers fast native application with no dependency on runtimes, no dependency on big third-party ecosystems. The code is compiled, so you have great control on your intellectual property and great control on the performance of the application. It offers database access as a key tenet from the ground, from the foundation of the product. It offers powerful C++ libraries and a strong community with a lot of third-party components. It offers platform API access, so you're never limited in terms of what you can do, but at the same time has visual designers that let you prototype and build application faster, whether it's Windows or multi-device. It allows you to leverage all of your existing investment, all of your existing code, and even 10, 15, 20 years code can be moved over very rapidly to a new version of RAD Studio. What we have been doing recently, that is before the RAD 11 release, was enhancing the IDE with dark theme and full styling support, redesigning the entire Delphi coding site experience with LSP, rework the installation, specifically the offline installation, and provide MSIX support. We have added additional components like T-controllers for displaying a lot of items in a very efficient way, T-number box, and T-edge browser, which is one of the elements of our Project Reunion support. For C++, we've added a new 64-bit debugger and largely improved exception handling and the standard template library support. For FireMonkey and multi-device, on the Delphi side, we added macOS 64-bit Intel support, and for the latest iOS and Android, including Apple Metal GPU driver support and recently FireMonkey low-code application wizard. And with that, I'll let David introduce what we're doing with the RAD Studio 11 IDE.
Thanks, Marco. There's something we've had on the roadmap for some time and that I've been wanting to be able to announce for quite a while, and today in RAD Studio 11 we have it. RAD Studio now fully supports high DPI. This means the entire IDE is now crisp and clear, perfectly scaled on high-resolution monitors. You can see two comparison screenshots taken by Jim. On the left, the old version of the IDE looks blurry on a high-res screen because it is visually scaled up by Windows. On the right, RAD Studio 11 natively supports high-res screens and Windows High DPI scaling, and so is pixel perfect, with crisp and clear text, images and other rendering on screen, including the code editor and the form designer. This is a night and day difference when using the IDE on modern displays. On the technical side, since the IDE is mostly built with Delphi and C++ Builder, it uses the VCL, and so we are using the same per monitor version 2 high DPI support that you too can make use of in your applications. We also use the same image collection and virtual image list components for high-res icons. That is, the same very powerful tech, better than what's inbuilt into Windows, that is also available to you for your own high DPI apps. For those who write plugins, we have extended the Tools API to support adding high-res images, such as toolbar icons or logos on the splash screen. Let's jump right in and have a look. I'm recording this on a 4K monitor. The stream you're watching right now may be lower res, but we'll have a replay up on YouTube, and hopefully you'll be able to stream that at 4K resolution to see the IDE in all its high DPI glory. Windows is set to scale at 200%, so everything is drawn at double the resolution. That means 2 pixels horizontally and 2 vertically for every pixel at low res, or a total of 4 high-res pixels per low-res pixel. As you can see, the IDE draws very clearly. I'm zooming in here so it's visible even when streamed. You can see that the text, even when zoomed in, remains very well rendered. We replaced our icons using the VCL virtual image list components. I don't want to focus on icons too much. They're definitely not the most important of the things we'll show today, and most are just higher res versions of the old ones. But we do care about usability and design in the IDE, and the core actions of the IDE, like running with debugging and stepping over a line of code, have new icons designed to clearly represent what they do. The most interesting part of high DPI support is the form designer. You can use the VCL form designer in high DPI, and there are also several options so you can change the behavior to suit your own setup and requirements. Here's a VCL form. If you remember, the IDE is running at 200%, and you can see the form is displaying the same size, the same scale as the IDE, so it is being designed at 200% too. When you run the app, it will scale up or down to match the scale of the screen it is being run on. However, the DPI it's being designed at and control positions and size are saved in the DFM file, and you may not want those values to change just because you open a form at high resolution. Or you may want to design all your forms across your entire team at a specific DPI for consistency across your team, even if different team members use different displays with different DPIs. You can change this in the options dialog on the user interface form designer high DPI page. I'll change to design at 96 DPI. That's low DPI, in other words, smaller than the IDE is scaled to. You can see the form designer updates, and the form is now scaled at a low DPI scale. You're not limited to that though, and you can set a custom DPI to use for your form designing. This is useful so that all your team members design using the same settings despite having different hardware. Here, I've decided I'll design all my forms at 144 DPI, or 150%. The form designer supports high DPI for forms, frames, and data modules, and can design at any DPI you wish, even if that DPI is different to the DPI the rest of the IDE or the rest of Windows is using. The default is to design at low DPI, but you can easily change that as we just saw, and we recommend either just using automatic or choosing a value that your team as a whole will agree on. We haven't covered the FireMonkey designer, but that's a simpler scenario than Windows VCL scaling, and it just scales to match the IDE's scale. Another new feature in the form designer is to show VCL styles in the designer. Now, one of the reasons to have a visual designer is to design and preview your app close to how it will look when it's run. And while we supported changing the look and feel at runtime, until today we didn't support previewing that at design time. Now you can see how your form and controls will look with a VCL style right in the designer. And don't forget that in a recent release we also added support for per control styling, so you can mix multiple styles in one form. And this is supported at design time too. The Object Inspector property editor also shows a small preview of what the style will look like. This feature is controlled in the options dialog and is off by default. Now that's only because third-party components require code changes to draw styles at design time and may not have done that yet, meaning you'll get a mix of styled and unstyled in the designer. But we plan to enable it by default in a future release once there's been time for everyone to update their components to support the feature. Personally, it's such a neat feature that I recommend turning it on right away. There's much more new in the IDE, and I'll cover the rest only briefly. The FireMonkey designer now has hints and guidelines like the VCL designer, which is a great productivity improvement and makes aligning controls much easier. There have been many quality improvements to Delphi LSP Code Insight based on your feedback. We have a new C++ code formatter using Clang format, which will pick up the formatting rules for your project automatically if you have a .clang format file, as many open source C++ projects do, or you can use the Embarcadero format as a backup. To go along with high DPI, we have changed the default editor font to Consolus, which looks absolutely beautiful on high-res displays, and we also install a number of other popular coding fonts you can choose to use. And finally, we have improvements to designing and coding a unit at the same time. This one's worth a demo. One reason to use the old floating form designer might have been to design a large form and use as much of the screen as possible. Now you can place the form designer in a secondary window and so not have much chrome around it. In fact, if you design on a high-res display and have custom designer DPI settings to design at lower DPI, you can even fit a form that can be multiple times the size of your screen in the designer all on screen at once, which is better than even the old floating form designer allowed. But what I want to show here is two windows, both the same unit opened. For the webinar, these are on one screen, but you can imagine these are on two different screens. And the designer is open in the main IDE window. If in the front window I toggle from the code to the design view, you can see the designer is automatically moved to this window. But better yet, I can choose where to have the designer for this unit. There's a button in the designer to move it, and I can pull the designer from window to window to have it where I want. Back and forth, pulling the designer from one window to another. This lets you have the same unit open and to both code and design at the same time, with the designer in any window, and combined with designer DPI scaling even handle very large forms. Finally, we also have a new welcome page. It's useful when you start the IDE to have quick access to open recent projects, create a new one, and so forth. Our old welcome page used an embedded browser, but we've rebuilt it in the VCL. One of the nice things here is that you can completely edit the layout, adding and removing whatever content you want. If you want to have only a list of recent projects and you want that to be only a thin column on the left-hand side, you can. You can display whatever you want, however you want. The installer also has some improvements. As well as supporting high DPI, you can choose where to store the catalog repository files on your system. We have improvements to choosing the language you want to run the IDE in, and the installer now downloads in parallel for faster installation. One more thing. Delphi LSP, which provides Delphi code insights such as code completion, uses the Open Language Server Protocol, which means it can theoretically be used with other editors like VS Code, and we've had inquiries if this is possible. Today, not only are we supporting using Delphi LSP from VS Code, but we have an official Embarcadero plugin available in the VS Code marketplace to allow editing Delphi source code with LSP Code Insight within VS Code. On to the Delphi and C++ languages. C++ has a big focus this release on quality and on interop with Delphi. As in the past couple of releases, we've focused a lot on Windows exception handling, both 32 and 64-bit, and it's looking great. Some really complex testing scenarios are working well, and one very complex library we test against that uses multiple modules and some unusual behavior is now working very well. If your code or libraries use exception handling, this is of great benefit to you. We've also improved CMake support with more revision and improvements to its functionality, useful if you use open source projects. One area that Clang was weak in was runtime type information, or RTTI. Our C++ compilers generate Delphi-style RTTI for Delphi-style types implemented in C++, like a component or any class inheriting from T-object. And in this release, we've completely overhauled how Clang does this, to make sure it matches what Delphi itself produces. Not only is this useful in general, but the IDE uses the Delphi RTTI for generating and connecting event handlers. This means you can now build your C++ components using Clang and use those in the IDE. Now that was Delphi-style RTTI. We now also generate C++-style RTTI for all Delphi types in the Delphi compiler, meaning all C++ code accessing C++ RTTI will now work regardless of type, and that includes using type ID. This means code using either C++ or Delphi RTTI will find the data it expects, and you can take advantage of the joined Delphi C++ ecosystem in ways that you could when using the classic compiler, but now using Clang. In addition, we've also improved general Delphi C++ interop. For example, C++ code often uses string view for lightweight access into strings, and now you can get a string view into a Delphi string, letting you use a Delphi string directly with C++ libraries that use string views. Also, C++ code tends to use C++ strings, yet UI code like VCL event handlers or accessing control properties like a caption use Delphi strings. And in the past, these two string types had to be manually converted using some ugly code like accessing cstr. In other words, it used to be difficult to mix. Now you can directly assign and convert between C++ and Delphi strings. The combination of these, both string view and string assignment or conversion, means that mixing Delphi and C++ string types is seamless, both in your own code and using existing C++ libraries, which is much easier coding for you and opens up more possibilities for taking advantage of C++ algorithms and third-party libraries. Finally, we have conversion methods to convert to and from strings and inbuilt core Delphi types like currency, tDateTime, and variant, as well as basic types like integers and floating point. This is something the classic compiler let you do, and these new methods, which are C++ish in design, let you do the same thing easily with the Clang compiler. Overall, a big revision supporting Delphi and C++ fundamentals, with great exception handling and a focus on quality of life when interoperating between Delphi and C++ from your C++ code. Things that you may have relied on Classic to achieve in the past now work with Clang, and you have easier coding and seamless interop between key Delphi and C++ types in a C++-ish way that C++ developers will find natural and familiar to use. With that, I'll hand over to Marco.
Thanks, David. This is Marco again. In Delphi 11, we've added a few, even small language enhancements, namely the ability to define binary literal values, that is, represent an integer value with zeros and ones, and the ability to use a separator to better display any large digit, like 1 million here. You can use the underscore anywhere you want in a numeric value and it will just be ignored by the language parser. We've also added support at the assembly level for AVX instructions, so you can use those directly in your code. We have also further enhanced the compiler performance, delivering everything that was in 10.4.2 and in the patches that were available 10.4.2 plus a few more optimizations. But the big feature part of Delphi 11 is the native support for macOS 64-bit ARM target platform. You can build an application for the Silicon M1 hardware, and that will run natively on a new macOS rather than going through a translation layer. This includes not just the compiler, but the entire toolchain and the support for signing application, and also the ability when you're using the Delphi IDE to select a universal binary package. That is a package that's going to include both the Intel 64 and the ARM 64 binaries within a single application package, ready to be deployed on the macOS store or be distributed to your customers if they have a mix of ARM and Intel-based macOS devices. Let's see a quick demo of macOS 64-bit ARM.
RAD Studio 11 Alexandria supports a new Delphi target platform, Mac OS ARM 64-bit, to natively target the new M1 Apple Silicon CPUs with Mac OS 11. You can use this platform to build native M1 applications and get your apps running on Apple's Mac OS Monterey. You can create a universal binary containing both Intel and ARM code. To do so, ensure the target platform is macOS ARM 64-bit, and then in the project options tick the Generate Mac OS Universal Binary File checkbox.
Let's now move to the quality and feature improvements that we've added to RAD Studio 11 libraries. The first one I want to focus on is VCL, where we have done a significant amount of modernization work. We've been looking forward to remove any legacy from old version of Windows, like Windows XP, and make sure that our controls support all of the features that the platform provides, whether it is because they map to the right platform controls or leverage new Windows messages or new APIs that have become available over the last few years. The most significant is the new ReachEdit implementation that now includes the latest platform control and offers features like URL detection, transparency, and spell checking. All you need to do to migrate an existing application is open it and then enable those features in the matching properties of the TRichEdit Control in RAD Studio 11. The collection of improvements is very, very long. One of the most notable is also preview checkboxes, but you can read here that we've really done a lot to make sure that the components behave as you would expect. We've added multi-frame support for the platform, Windows imaging control. We've added some features around defaults, like a bigger default font size, different default font for forms, and really dozens of other small improvements that really make your life easier in everyday VCL development. We've also improved the support for running VCL applications on a remote desktop, removing some of the flickering and some of the issues that are more visible in that scenario. And that also affects positively the IDE when you are using remote desktop to use RAD Studio. Finally, we've introduced a new small component, a data-aware label edit control. But let's have a look to some of these controls in practice and also to how VCL applications run and look on Windows 11. This is a VCL application that uses the TRichEdit control. As you can see here, we have new properties like transparent, show URL hint, and spell checking, which are all active. Now, if I run this application, you can see that just by typing the text over URL, that becomes a hyperlink. You can also see that if I misspell something, I have it underlined with a red squiggle and can go and correct it using the hints that the operating system provides me. When I click on the URL, I'm going to open a page. That's because there is a new event in the ReachEdit Control, which is editor link click, which is where you can implement the operation to be executed when the user clicks on the URL. This other example shows a tree view where we can enable the check boxes and we can change the style for the checkbox. We can iterate it through multiple different options. And of course, we can automatically change the styles or read the status of each of the items.
Running the latest insider beta of Windows 11 here. And one of the distinguishing features is the rounded corners. So I wanted to show you that by default, your Delphi applications will have rounded corners, but you can't control it. I am showing with the custom title bar because I figured that would be the worst case scenario. And I've set some colors and centered the title bar here. There is some code in here, I'll show you, that I've added to turn off the rounding or set the rounding to small or turn it back on again based on which button you press. So here we have the default, which we see with the rounded corners. So at this point, no additional APIs have been called. I can turn off the custom title bar, turn it back on again. Rounded corners stayed the same. I can turn off the rounding, and now we've got pointy corners like Windows 10, and go back to regular rounding or even small rounding, which also gets rid of the shadow. But otherwise, everything works about the same as it did in Windows 10.
The next library I want to cover is FireMonkey, which is RAD Studio cross-platform user interface library. Specific areas we're focused on are desktop support across macOS and Windows, and we are achieving it by refactoring some of the services that the platforms provide so that your application can work seamlessly with the same source code across the desktop operating system and in many cases also on mobile. For Windows specifically, we have improved the high DPI support by moving from a pixel logic to a device independent units logic. So every size or distance or position is now expressed in logical units, and that helps better scaling to high resolution monitors. Really, you can recompile an existing Windows FireMonkey application and you can see better UI rendering, better and more crisp fonts and lines on Windows. We've also expanded our Android support by targeting the API 30 level. To accomplish it, we also had to update our Android X support. We have improved in-app purchase support, and today we are matching all of the Android Play Store requirements from Google. Another nice feature is the ability to deliver more than one file with Java code in it, simplifying the integration of external Android libraries. The other big feature in FireMonkey is support for Edge or WebView 2 control, as Microsoft calls it. This is again one of the features in the Project Reunion technology. We offer this support in VCL in 10.4 and improved it in 10.4.2, and now the same features are coming in FireMonkey as part of the T web browser component. The big difference is that in the past the implementation was limited to Internet Explorer and most of the existing websites don't render properly there, while now you can pick for Edge if available on the target computer and have a much smoother and better rendering of the websites you might want to show within a FireMonkey application on Windows. This is a FireMonkey application that uses the T web browser component. I can configure it with different Windows engine. If I pick Internet Explorer as the engine, like it used to be by default, when I run the application and open the Embarcadero website, you can see that the content is scrambled, the information is not displayed like it should be, there's alignments are all wrong, and the flow is completely broken compared to the real site. Now, if I take the same application and moving to using Edge, which I have installed on this computer, if I now run it and press the button to navigate to the Embarcadero web page, the content is displayed with the proper flow, and everything is aligned and displayed as you would be in Chrome, because that's exactly the engine behind the Edge Chromium WebView 2 control. Beside our FireMonkey and VCL user interface libraries, we have also extended most of the other libraries that are part of RAD Studio as part of the runtime library, the data access layer, HTTP clients, and so forth. Let's start with the Delphi runtime library, where we address several issues and focus on a few specific areas, including improvement for tzip file class for compression and decompression of files. We have included support for 64-bit zip files, a deletion of individual entries, and a number of quality improvements and performance optimizations. We have also enhanced our support for some large data structures, specifically when you're building 64-bit application like list, operations on large streams, dictionary improvements, also in terms of hashing and capacity management. We've introduced new record helpers for tDateTime, tCurrency. So now you can have a tDateTime value in Delphi and use the dot notation to access all of the many operations you can apply to a datetime data structure. There are new core classes. One has been introduced to manage non-reference counted interface objects. It's called tNorRefCount object. That's, of course, an alternative to the interfaced object, which implements reference counting for an interface-based object. The other class we introduced is a tPointer stream, which is a variation on a memory stream with the ability to just use a pointer to an existing memory structure rather than allocating a new block of memory for the stream. We have enhanced quality for Bluetooth LE on all of the platforms that we support. We've made several performance optimizations and improved runtime time information support, specifically around open arrays. We now surface these stats about thread pooling for the parallel programming library, and have enhanced FireDuck database access drivers, specifically with improvements for Postgres, SQL, Oracle, and Firebird databases. But we've also made a number of general fixes to FireDuck and minor fixes for other database drivers. In terms of web technologies, in the HTTP client library, we've added support for HTTP/2 on Windows. There is a new protocol version property in the client component. We've also added custom content type in a REST request. We've added a public key for certificates. We have restored an old feature of DataSnap, which is the ability, when using DataSnap with a REST API, that is the ability to configure the mapping of the URI to a method. So by a given URL that's invoked, you can determine which method is executing. We've also added support for base64 URL encoding. On RAD server, we've done a few more things. Support for multi-platform data directly built into the system. A new client component called TRequest Dataset Adapter that helps you upload an entire dataset to RAD server. And also, which is relevant, a new distribution model for RAD server. This is called RAD Server Lite. It's a version of RAD server that embeds Interbase2Go, making it very easy to deploy because you don't need to deploy an instance of the Interbase server. It offers unlimited deployment, but it also has limited throughput because it's a standalone server with, again, an embedded database that will not scale to thousands of connections. We have done a significant amount of effort to address issues raised by customers on the public quality portal system. We've implemented well over 100 features that have been requested on quality portal, and we fixed over 650 bugs, considering also other resolutions, features that we've decided not to do, bugs that are not relevant anymore because we have replaced the subsystem with a new subsystem, for example, the welcome page, and other types of resolution, including duplicates, which we generally have quite a significant number. The total number of issues that we are closing is 150 new features and over 900 bugs. To end the presentation, let me provide you a summary of what's in RAD Studio 11. As you have seen in this session, we've put a large focus on the IDE with a high DPI IDE and high DPI enabled from Designer. Moreover, the ability to use VCL styles in the Designer and improved in the FMX Designer. The LSP quality and new C++ code formatter help you write your code. We have a new welcome page, Visual Studio Code, Delphi LSP support, and improvements to the minimal installer. For Delphi and C++ compilers and toolchains, we have added quality on the C++ side, including support for components with the CLang compiler and better exception handling. We are providing native support from Delphi macOS 64 ARM, the M1 CPUs, and done a couple of minor Delphi language improvements. We have extended the Delphi Art runtime libraries with quality improvements and modernized VCL, improved FireMonkey high DPI support on Windows, and integrated WebView 2. We have also round up our support for Android with API 30 target and related work. And last but not least, we are now officially supporting building and deploying Linux applications compiled with Delphi on the Windows subsystem for Linux, which is something we want to leave you as a final demo.
I'll open up Windows Terminal, open a Ubuntu instance, run WSL fetch to get the version information, and then I'll use a script to start PA server and show my IP address to verify I'm connected to the correct instance. Looks like we're good. Test the connection. And now we'll run this simple little console application. And we see the output's what we expected, the same numbers displayed twice. But we can debug it now and change the value from the generated value to the value of our choice. It is the value we changed it to. But that's not all. Now in WSL2, in the Windows 11 version, you can run GUI applications. So this application will just display the OS version as a string. And there we see it. And we can check it against the information we got from WSL fetch and see that it is running on Ubuntu 20.04.3 LTS. The remainder of the video is the live Q&A from the 3 original launch webinars. There are a lot of questions already coming in, and Marco, David, and Stephen Ball and myself have been frantically typing answers. Stephen Ball's volunteered to come on and help, which really is appreciated. I don't think we keep up on this on our own. So great to see so many people out here. The question I've seen the most often, Marco, is when is RAD Studio 11 to be released?
RAD Studio 11 is going to be released shortly, but it is not out yet. When it will be released, just monitor our social media or monitor your email. Well, you will receive an announcement if you have an existing update subscription, because you'll just be able to download it from the download portal, and your existing license will be applicable to the new release once it becomes available.
Okay, so that was the next question. If you're on update subscription, you can just use it when it comes out.
Yes, exactly. If you install on the same machine, the license is just there. Otherwise, you need to register the license. If you have run out of license bumps, license registration, you need to ask support. But we are upping a bit the license for everyone, the number of registrations to account for it.
Oh, and then you can download it from my.embarcadero.com when it becomes available.
Yes, once available, it will be there.
David, some questions about the LSP support in Visual Studio Code. Does that also support debugging or compiling, or what else can you tell us about that?
All right, so this is the first version of our support for Visual Studio Code, and it's a bit of an experiment, really, just to see how you like it. If you like it, if there's uptake and that kind of thing. So this supports the normal code design features, like code completion, and it has syntax highlighting and other things like that. It doesn't support compiling or debugging from within Visual Studio Code, and we don't have any plans for that at the moment, simply because we're just waiting to see how interest grows. But definitely everything that you expect from from actually writing code is there.
Any plans to support other editors?
Not officially, but I mean, the LSP protocol is an open protocol. So any editor that supports the LSP protocol and can communicate over standard I/O, console I/O to an LSP server should, in theory, be able to use it. Okay. As you can see with Visual Studio Code, we haven't. We have an official plugin, but we haven't made specific changes to support it in the server.
Now, if somebody has components only with DCUs, they don't have source code, will the LSP work with that as well, the code completion?
Yeah, that level of support is the same as within the IDE. So yes, in other words.
All right. Marco, the RAD server Lite, does it work? What SKUs is available for?
So RAD server Lite is available with, well, all SKUs where RAD server is available. There is both Enterprise and Architect. And for both Enterprise and Architect, it allows unlimited deployment of instances of RAD server. It's also very easy to deploy because you just need to have the executable and a bunch of DLLs, including the interbase to go library in a folder, and you're basically good to go. Well, plus a license file. There will be steps to get the license file that not immediately available on GA. We might need a couple of extra days to have everything set up, but with your license key, you'll be able to obtain a slip file that you distribute with your RAD server instance, and that will be good. No registration or nothing, just put the files on a folder or on a Docker instance or where you need, and it's up to go. Now, it comes with limitations, mostly due to the fact that being standalone, it doesn't rely on the features of a full-blown web server. The other is that because it uses interface to go, it has, bandwidth limitation. You can hit it with like hundreds of hits at the same time. It will not scale as the full RAD server does. But it serves a need of easy deployment, testing. In some cases, it would be enough for customers to use as is without going to the bigger version.
So here's a question I can answer. Will RAD Studio run in a Windows VM on a Mac M1? So actually, that's what a lot of my demo videos were created with, is Windows 11, but it'll run on Windows 10 as well in a Parallels virtual machine on the M1. And performance was good. I didn't do like serious benchmarking, but for everything else I've seen as far as benchmarking goes, it's the performance should be pretty competitive. David, some questions for you here. The toString and FromString, what strings types does that support?
So those are for the Delphi string types, so Unicode string, wide string, and ANSI string. That includes UTF-8 string. There was a question there if they were for C++ types. So C++ already includes like std toString, for example, for an integer. So we have effectively, they're in the system namespace, not the std namespace, but effectively overloads for those for the Delphi string types, but also for the Delphi inbuilt core types like tDateTime. But due to the new support for converting easily between C++ and Delphi strings, if you want to get a C++ string with a tDateTime, then you can just assign it.
Okay. And is the IDE 64-bit yet?
Not yet, although we have definitely been discussing it. High DPI was the first thing we wanted to do. We're glad to have that out this release. Bit of a game changer there. It's a pleasure to use. And after that, we'll consider what other moves we make. Nothing to announce there yet.
I gotta say that I got a high DPI monitor because I just hadn't got one yet, and I got one and started using RAD 11, and wow, it really does look amazing. And honestly, the Zoom screenshots we showed, it doesn't really. The difference is just. You become very aware, once you have a high DPI monitor, you become very aware of non-high DPI applications, and especially the code rendering just looks beautiful. So, will you add split screen to the editor, David?
Possibly. It's certainly something we'd like to add. We actually did a research project on it. Sometimes we just do these things where certain features and we just do a bit of research to what's involved. So we can. We have a path for implementing it. Just not certain of the priority or when we'll actually do it. Again, we've been focusing on other things first. I mean, not to mention high DPI again, but high DPI, but also things around supporting editing forms in other windows, especially if you're multiple monitors or something like that. We've been focusing on that kind of thing ahead of split screen code editing. But it's certainly something that comes up occasionally and we'd like to implement.
Okay, Marco, I guess either of you, any plans to have the IDE running on Mac OS natively?
Well, that's fairly long stretch, and not that we are not considering it, but it requires both changing the IDE completely and also making sure that you can run compilers and tools on another platform. So it's something that's been discussed, but it's not something we can achieve shortly unless we do only that for a fairly long amount of time.
David, the customizable welcome screen, a lot of great improvements there. Can people add their own content? Tech partners make plugins for that?
Yeah, it is a good improvement. I think especially that it's nice to use the VCL rather than than a web browser. I mean, the VCL is a very good UI framework. So it works with a whole heap of different frames, and you can sort of add and remove frames and various content. Now, in this release, you can't write a plugin to do that, but it's something that we want to do in future. I mean, it's been designed so that we will be able to open it up. For something like that, we usually sort of try to have a release with a feature and just let it sort of bake for a while before deciding to make APIs public. But I think the idea of being able to write a plugin for any content you want there is a really good idea. You can have show the status of your CI builds. You could all sorts of things. Basically, anything that you want to have in a kind of dashboard could be put in a welcome page. And that's certainly something we'd like to open up.
Marco, the T web browser, does that support Chrome, Google Chrome, or Edge, or what is exactly supported there?
So the T web browser on FireMonkey, exactly the one that we've been shipping since 10.4 with VCL, has support for what Microsoft calls WebView 2 control. WebView 2 control shares its core rendering engine with the Chromium-based version of the Edge browser. The advantage of using WebView 2 compared to Chromium is that if you use Chromium, you have to ship the library with your application, and for security reason, update your application every 8 weeks. That's the rule. Now, Microsoft has an evergreen version of the WebView 2 control so that you can install and your customers can install. There's even a free redistributable setup. At that point, the control gets automatically all of the security fixes, and all your application has to do is automatically use the last version of the engine. So it reduces the size of our application, reduces the need of updating that library for security reason. And so it's a very nice solution for the Windows platforms. And also notice it does not require you to install Edge on the client computer. It's like the old Internet Explorer, that engine that would exist without Internet Explorer, the application. So you don't need to ask your customers to install another browser. They can just use Chrome or use whatever they want to use. And your application will use this engine regardless of the fact that the Edge application is on the computer. Now, the other thing, I saw another question floating around, that annoying DLL that you need to deploy, it is still there. That's a Microsoft requirement. There's not much we can do there. So you need to deploy, you need to have Edge WebView 2 installed on the target machine, and you need to distribute a single 200K or something like that, a DLL, with your executable. Just drop it in the same folder. No need to go into any more hassle than that. There's no registration or nothing. Just the local. Just put it in the folder with your exe.
So Peter, actually, a couple people commented about the Android API level 30. Now, that's not saying that the minimum requirement is 30. It's the compatibility library for 30. So that means you can use Android API level 30, but then you can go back quite a few old versions of Android. So it's still support. I don't think we dropped support for any platforms, any previous versions of Android.
Yeah, we did a bit. We support 8.1 onwards. I think we dropped support for 7, which is getting oldish at this point.
Yeah, so that's still going to support 99% of Android. If you go, they used to have, I don't know if they still have the chart, but they used to have a thing where you go see how many apps are visiting the App Store and what versions of Android they're using. It's still going to be 90% of them that are supported, for sure. So it's not dropping support for anything less than 30. It's just adding support for up to 30. David, a lot of great comments about the new look in the IDE. The icons look great. They look fantastic, especially the high DPI. What about ligatures in the editor?
So the editor only supports high DPI. We haven't changed much else about the text rendering there, and that means no ligature support yet. That actually requires a rendering tech change. We need to move to Direct 2D or one of those other similar technologies. So we definitely like it. It's not in version 11 yet, but it's something that we would like to do.
Cool. And it does support some emojis, but they're black and white, not color.
It does, yeah. And when we upgrade the text so that you can have ligatures and that kind of thing, things like color emojis will come in with it. See some fun code on the internet using emojis as symbols and things like that. To be honest, supporting emojis in the code editor really hasn't been our highest priority. But definitely text rendering improvements and stuff there are something that we want to look at. There's a whole lot of stuff around the editor that we would like to do. Really.
Okay, the questions are coming in faster than we're answering them, so I'm sorry if we don't get to everything.
I see them scrolling, yeah, which is fantastic. It's really nice to see all this, this feedback and interest.
Yeah, so I definitely will pull the question log and provide it to Marco and David, and maybe we can have a blog post with more details in here. It'll be equivalent of a full book, though, most likely. Marco, can you still build programs for Windows XP?
Well, not that we're really sure because we don't test on XP. We do test on, our primary target is Windows 10, Windows 11, of course, is coming soon. We are doing a good amount of testing in terms of target platform for Windows 7. We're not actively testing XP, which is really, really out of the picture a bit. I think that the only trouble you might have is that we are generating a PA format, an executable format that is marked to require a higher version, but that's just a flag you can change as a compilation parameter. Other than that, it should run on some pretty old version of Windows. as long as you don't use any of the new features. I mean, you won't have Chrome, you won't have WinRT features, you won't have, I mean, everything that requires a newer version. But most of these features are loaded dynamically in an application. So with some, if you are careful, you should still be able to target XP.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you're using, some of the new APIs, then it won't work. But I know that in previous versions, I've had some MVPs and developers who have contacted me and say it still works on XP, but you got to be careful. So I would expect that to still be the case. But yeah, as you said, it's not something we're actively testing for sure. The TRichEdit, Marco, does the spell checker in there work for other languages, especially non-Latin character sets?
So we haven't written that code. It's not our code in any way. What we do, we just send a message to ReachEdit, say, hey, enable spell checking, and Microsoft does it. Now, we've done some testing on a few different versions of Windows, and it seems to work smoothly on the locale of the installed version of Windows. So you have a German version of Windows, it will do that in German. If you have a Japanese one, though, it should do it in Japanese, and so forth. It's really 100% something Microsoft implemented. We don't have any real control on that behavior. I don't think you can plug in a custom engine in terms of spell checking at what the operating system provides out of the box. And same, because someone was asking also about the URL recognition system and so forth. This all comes in the box. If you type a URL, it becomes hyperlink. It's displayed as a hyperlink by the operating system, and you receive, someone clicked a link event, and then you write the code you want to write. I mean, that's completely to you.
Mm-hmm. David, can you give more info about the C++ code formatting and how the also code completion and Visual Assist we're at with that?
Sure. So the old code formatter has been removed, and we've replaced that with Clang format, which obviously is part of the sort of Clang project that we focus our technology around. That has really flexible formatting rules, and one of the nice things is that we've added support there. It's quite common for C++ projects to ship with formatting rules as part of the source, or rather alongside the source, and that can be used in a pre-commit hook, for example, to format its source and that kind of thing when you check in. And so we support that. So if you have that that formatting config file in your source code, when you format it, will just be picked up and used automatically. You don't have to change any settings to try and get the same format as the rest of your project. It will just work there. Although as a backup, we have an Embarcadero style defined as well that formats quite similarly to how it's in the IDE, which you can also use. In terms of VA and code completion and that kind of thing, VA has been on Visual Assist, has been on the roadmap for a while. Still working on that. It's definitely still on the roadmap, very high priority. Bit of insight, things like fixing formatting is actually something that we want to do before integrating Visual Assist. For example, VA will often produce code, but it just says what code to insert, not how to insert it, because that's the IDE's responsibility. So we want to be able to have a better formatter so that when we get that text from Visual Assist, it will be formatted alongside the other code. So still on the roadmap, still a high priority.
So there are a couple more questions about the 64-bit IDE. What's the since IDE is written in Delphi, why is it not just as a matter of changing targets?
Well, I mean, the IDE is a gigantic application. And whenever you convert from 32 to 64-bit, there's always work that you have to do. That said, it's definitely something that we get a lot of questions about, and
is definitely something we're looking into. I don't want to promise a particular release, but I can say that it's something that we know there is interest in. But the IDE has many components. I mean, there's the editor, for example, and there's the Delphi compiler itself, which is often loaded as DLL, and a whole bunch of other DLLs and things like that. We have a lot to bring forward. It's not just a simple VCL app, but there's quite a lot extra with it. So it's definitely doable. It's definitely achievable. It's quite a lot of work, and for that reason, I don't want to promise when we'll.
All right, my favorite thing to bring up, Marco. Any plans to support ARM Linux or ARM Windows? ARM's getting big.
Yeah, as I mentioned at the beginning, ARM is getting big, and it's making inroad in places where it was a bit uncommon until recently, namely outside of the phones, where it has been like absolutely the winning solution. Now Apple with macOS has made a very big bet. I mean, just say, hey, sorry, Intel is gone. That's all. Only ARM for now on, and so it felt natural to give to the macOS platform precedence over other options. Microsoft is inching in the same direction, but rather than making a big bet as Apple, they're kind of making things in parallel, reconsidering, going back and forth. I mean, over recent years. But they are moving on. They are now providing Win64 emulation support for the macOS, for their ARM devices, which is a big thing because until recently it was Win32 only, which was becoming troublesome in terms of emulation. And they are pushing. Although I mean the percentage of Windows devices that use an ARM is still fairly small compared to the number of devices out there with an Intel. And I mean, I'm saying about new devices being shipped, not what's available, which is of course favoring Intel largely. So it is a platform we are discussing and considering, but no announcement for now. The other platform that has increasingly attracting our interest is Linux ARM for a couple of reasons. I mean, if you consider it exclusively from the angle of hey, it's nice for IoT type, for developer boards, for Raspberry Pi, nice, great, but it's a little more difficult for us to find a business justification of making an investment, as the people targeting those tools, those devices, tends to use completely free tools, and they might not be willing to shell out the money required for our tooling to target a Raspberry. So it would be quite more expensive than the hardware you need to buy. But the landscape there is changing as well, and particularly ARM is making inroad on Linux server side, is making inroad as a cloud hosted platform, and in other scenarios that are certainly more interesting. I mean, Raspberry Pi is interesting. I mean, I no denial. I mean, I personally like it, but again, if you think about a large corporation, might not have a big fit. While the idea of Linux ARM on the servers is something that is growing and is certainly driving a lot of attention from companies and businesses.
Yeah, okay. David, any comments about the roadmap for macOS and Android and C++?
Nothing we can share at the moment, unfortunately. Sorry about that.
Okay. Marco, what are the latest versions of Linux that we support? So I know we support WSL2. I demoed with the 20.04, I think, I don't remember what, the LTS version of Ubuntu. What are the versions of Linux we officially support?
I really don't remember. I think we're supporting 11. I mean, Ubuntu 11. 18, every version is 11 now, 18 and 20, and Red Hat, I think it's 8, but I don't take it for granted. It will be on the page of the doc wiki once that is officially out. And if you want to follow up or email, I can check and provide a specific and correct answer.
So some questions about web development with Delphi and C++ Builder. What's the recommended routes for that? I know there's a few choices there.
Oh, there are many choices, and while we have our preference, I mean, we are happy to support all of them. If you want something that allows to visually create a web application, like drop a component, a button, and edit, and they show up on your browser, we don't have a direct solution. We recommend using any of the third-party tools, from InterWeb to TMS Web Core to any of the others that have been developed over years. They are our partners. We are more than happy to support them and wish them the best success, because they help us target an area of developers who want the ability to do WYSIWYG, easy development, and target both Windows and target the web. For the other model that we support kind of slightly more directly is the idea of building web services, whether with RAD server, DataSnap, or again with third-party tools, and then create a pure web UI on top of it, using any of the JavaScript frameworks out there. Plus, I mean, we certainly encourage you to have a look to XJS, but anything is available. And as Jim is saying, they've been pushing out actually the RAD Studio 11 on the Embarcadero website, which I think makes officially that we have made the product available. So this was a preview webinar almost, because we knew that this was going to get out pretty soon. So I think the download is actually available, and someone mentioned having received an email that the new version is out. Not all of the bits get out at the very exact moment, and you won't see a blog post until we are done, because I need to push the publish button. So, that will be after the webinar is done, and so some of the other artifacts will come in over the next few hours. And things like the list of bugs being really fixed in Quality Portal, that might take until Monday. It is a lot of work.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff happening, but yep, it's one of those things we've been sitting here refreshing and messaging. Is it live? Is it live? So exciting news. So a lot of your questions, go download the trials, probably is the answer now. So if someone's on 10.4.2 and they're wanting to move to 11, what's the upgrade process going to look like? Marco?
Sorry, I missed the beginning of the question. So the scenario.
Sorry. If somebody's on 10.4.2 right now and they're wanting to move to RAD Studio 11, what's the upgrade process going to look like for them?
Well, you just open your projects and they are expected to work. Now, the thing you have to decide is if you want to enable high DPI in the designer. That's an option, which we generally recommend, but that implies changing some of the configuration of your DFM file. It means it might get a little tricky if you want to go back and forth the two versions. In that scenario, you want to stick to low DPI, although it doesn't look terribly great in the designer. It looks very small. That's the main issue. That's the only caveat. I mean, other than you can move on, make sure you have the source code or an updated version of any third-party component, because the DCU files and the BPF files for 10.4 and 10.5 are not compatible by design. Delphi is built with version compatibility at the root level, at the core level. So you need bits compiled with an 11 version of the compiler, which has been provided to our third-party vendors over the last few weeks and actually months. And so if they're not ready, I'm sure they will be ready shortly.
There's a question here about DevExpress and VCL styles. I'm pretty sure we did a webinar with them during Desktop First, and that came up, and they said it was fully supports the VCL styles and DevExpress components. So I have not personally confirmed that, but I'm pretty sure that's what they said during the webinar.
Yeah, notice also that in terms of VCL styles, since Stem 4, VCL styles are per component. So you can have a style application that has a form with a grid using the entire surface, and you can disable styling for that specific form. Or you can have a form mixed with other components in the same surface, and you just disable styling for that individual component. You just say Windows as style name for that component, and it goes with Windows native or whatever the third party implemented. So that allows to mix and match even components that do not formally support styles. It will be true at design time, will be true at runtime in your application. So style used to be all or nothing type of model, but since Stem 4, it's a more a la carte. It's per form, per component, and it's very flexible in that respect.
It's interesting. I've seen comments saying everything's news for mobile. What about Windows Desktop? And other comments saying, well, everything news for Windows Desktop. What about mobile? So there's new stuff for everybody. The high DPI IDE is certainly for everybody. Unfortunately, all the features can't be exactly the ones you're looking for, but I think there's a lot of great stuff in here. Windows VM on Mac machine. I thought Windows VMs on Mac M1 machines are ARM Windows only. Correct. So they are ARM Windows only, but Microsoft has expanded their emulation in Windows so that you can run both 32-bit and 64-bit applications. The only thing you can't do on ARM Windows, or on if you have an M1 Mac running a virtual machine, the only thing you can't run is x86 Linux applications. But everything else, I've tested it, works exactly like expected. You wouldn't know you were not on a M1 or not on an x86 CPU in every other scenario. And there's been a few times I've been like, oh, that's right, I'm on an M1 now. It works great. And the M1X is supposed to be coming out very soon. I think Apple's got announcements coming out in the near future on that. So Data Snap, anything around Data Snap updates for Data Snap, Marco?
We added one feature that was really highly requested. It's something that was available several years ago and was dropped, well, primarily because it was really broken, which is if you're using Data Snap with REST, not the old classic COM-based style. If you're using Data Snap with REST, you can now map incoming URLs to the methods being executed, so class/method that is being executed. That offers way more flexibility in the URL mapping and naming, which I think is appreciated by people who have invested on Data Snap. There are also some bug fixes and some quality improvements, but we're not putting a very large amount of effort into expanding Data Snap. We're putting a little more on RAD server, which is continually developed and extended over time.
David, here's a comment here about if you're using the IDE on a second monitor, that sometimes it flips back to the other monitor on debugging. I believe there was some changes that specifically addressed that.
There were actually a couple of versions ago. I don't know if it's 10.4.2 or 10.4.1. I can't quite remember, sorry. But the reason for that behavior is that the IDE has desktops defined. You know, the normal desktop, which is, or default desktop it's called, which is, you know, when you do your coding. When you start debugging, it switches to the debug desktop. And that desktop includes, you know, not only the dockable windows that you have that are visible, but also where the IDE is. You know, is it maximized and which screen's it on and so forth. So that's why it changes when you move between, you know, debugging and not. Now we have settings now in the IDE options dialog, so you can choose whether it's allowed to move monitor and when. So if that kind of behavior is something that you want to tweak, the settings there should hopefully address what you need.
So there's a comment here said that the icons will look great, but what about high DPI fonts? Support that the fonts, they look high DPI to me. I zoomed way in on them and they just look beautiful. I just want to sit there and stare at them.
They should be. The whole IDE should render in high DPI. So it's not just the icons, but all of the text and the menus, the code editor, and so forth.
And the Visual Studio Code support, the LSP is great. If somebody has a Delphi and Visual Studio or RAD Studio or Visual Studio Code installed on the same computer, could they have Visual Studio Code launch the compiler and be able to compile from Visual Studio Code?
We don't have any support on the extension for compiling and debugging yet. This is really a bit of an experiment for us, and we really just want to see how popular the extension is, and how much people use it, and what's where we should take it, if anywhere, and that'll just be based on feedback. So we started this off just with Delphi LSP support for coding, basically, and you still have to use the IDE for compiling and debugging, form designing, that kind of thing. I would think, and I've done a little bit with Visual Studio Code, but I would think if you were enterprising, you could certainly come up with a way to make Visual Studio Code call the Delphi compiler, but you'd have to call the command line compiler. I don't know. I bet someone will figure out. I never underestimate the ingenuity of developers. That's let's see. The refactoring, has some of the refactorings been fixed and improved for Delphi support, David? We have not changed the refactorings this release, no. They're definitely something that we want to change. There's a path to changing them, but that's not this release.
Okay. Gosh, sorry, I'm just having a hard time trying. I was doing okay for a while, but now I'm getting lost. Marco, is there a ReachEdit for FireMonkey?
No, there is not.
Because the ReachEdit is using the Windows DLL behind this, or Windows libraries behind the scenes. Can you install RAD Studio or Delphi 10.4 alongside with 11 side by side and use them both at the same time?
Yes. The recommendation is always to install in sequence, so install 10.4 before and 11 afterwards, and not in the reverse order. Although it shouldn't cause trouble, it is slightly more likely that something could get wrong. So recommendation is installed in release sequence on the same machine.
Yeah, I think it seems like I've done that and just run the file associations tool to fix it, but you could have.
Yeah, but it's also, for example, there are a couple, like Midas DLL is a single file that gets overwritten. There are a couple of things, or a couple of things are pushed to the registry, and it's better if you hit the latest DLL rather than a previous one. It's only minor things, but again, recommendation is to follow sequence when possible.
All right. Well, so if you've got 10.42, you can go download 11 and install it right now. Michael says he's installing C++ Builder 11 right now, so that's great. So as far as updates to Indy, we did add the platform HTTP client already that has HTTPS built into it, and as well as gzip that was added in XE5, I think. So that's a big improvement, and you can always install. There's also questions about FastMM5. You can always add updated versions of those. Marco, do we have any plans to add FastMM5 to the IDE?
Well, FastMM5 is not an open source. It's not an open source tool, so it's not something we can just distribute freely as it was with FastMM4. But we had some conversation with Pierre, and we're considering using it for some of the internal tooling, but we're certainly not planning to distribute as a runtime element that developers can use in their application.
There's a lot of people excited downloading, installing right now. That's great to see. Can you talk more about math performance improvements, Marco? I guess was there improvements around math?
No, I mean it's kind of easy. We had originally planned to spend more effort in this cycle in terms of math operations. It ended up because of a number of factors, including focusing more on compiler performance in 10.4.2, and then the patches we did after 10.4.2, and some additional work now. That work was mostly dropped. I mean, we did a few things, but really fairly minor. It still remains on the table for a future focus in a coming release.
Let's see. Were there improvements in the LSP in as far as general LSP performance in the IDE besides the LSP being added to Visual Studio Code, David?
Yeah, there were definitely a lot of fixes to LSP. So in this release, it wasn't really a release we focused on new features for LSP other than support in Visual Studio Code. But we did do a lot of quality work. One of the nice things about LSP is that we have very extensive logging, and so whenever someone files a bug report, we always ask that you include logs and their instructions for that on DocWiki. Those logs are extremely helpful, and we have been able to use them extensively in this release. So LSP tended to work very well for the majority of people, and then sometimes some people had problems where it would just appear to not work, which is a terrible description for a bug report, and that's pretty much what happened. And so we fixed the core reasons why that was. Should be much improved for everyone.
Yeah. So today's Alexandria's birthday. Yes, it is. Downloading now. Yes, you can download. Okay, great to hear. Great to hear. So there's comments about other Linux distros. Every Linux distro I've tried it on has worked fine. It's just a matter of installing the packages. Zachary's saying he's used it with Slackware, and that works great. The reason we support the two versions we say specifically call out support for is they're two of the most popular ones, but they also represent two of the big families. Everything, the CentOS Red Hat family on one side, and then Ubuntu is the most popular Debian family. So generally, if it works in there, it works everywhere. But the rule about Linux distros is no matter how many distros you tested on, there were new ones released while you were testing. So we can't guarantee it works everywhere, but it does, from everything I've seen, work on most general Linux distros. Let's see. BDE, is the BDE still available and supported, Marco?
Supported, no. It has not been supported for many years. Available, not yet. We built it, so we pushed it to the site for download. We gave it someone for downloading. Apparently, there was a 0-byte file somewhere. So we're looking into it. If it's easy, we're going to fix it. If it turns out to be a significant development effort, we might not end up providing it.
Bruce McGee had a great blog post about BDE, basically saying, "Are you sure you really want to keep using it?" Which, it's great that it's still available, but there is certainly a lot more great options available other options available, and a lot of things have changed over the years. Community edition of RAD Studio 11, Marco. I know we just released the 10.4.2 Community Edition. Is there plans to have a RAD Studio or a Delphi C++ Builder 11 Community Edition?
Yeah, there is a plan, but it's not a short-term plan. So if you are looking for a Community Edition for a free starting point to learn about the product, use it, build application for as a hobby or as a very small company, use it. But by all, I mean, we're recommending it, but it's going to stay on 10.4 for some time.
Yeah, there's going to be a lag there, but definitely, I believe the plan is that it will be updated. Yeah. The minimum hardware requirements or software requirements change if somebody's he's saying his Mac only runs High Sierra? Can he still use that? It works with 10.4.2. Will it work with 11? I don't think it's changed.
Yeah, that nothing coming out that say it shouldn't.
Yeah. Let's see. Mark, we talked about that one already. When would you use the RAD server Lite versus full RAD server? Can you explain that in more detail, Marco?
Sure. The idea of RAD server Lite is to have an easy to deploy solution for low traffic, which will certainly be great for testing, development testing, or even small, test scenarios with customers and so forth. If you are deploying a solution that's used by, I don't know, 100 customers on their phone, and each will be hit the website 10 minutes a day, there's no reason not to use it as the final solution you're deploying. If you have 1,000 customers all active 24 hours and hitting, that's no chance it will stem the traffic or respond properly. So for small solutions you might need and large number of deployments, because it has no registration, because you have free unlimited deployment, it can become a very nice option. But if you need like a solid, scalable, robust backend service, that's not going to be the best option to deploy. You do have one license for the full solution, as with an enterprise license. You have unlimited, which means many versions of many instances of the server. You have to register each of them with your license key, but you can deploy a large number of full-blown solution with the Architect Edition.
Great, David. I think you demonstrated the floating form designer, where you can have you can pull the designer into a different and float it, and then have the text editor side by side, right?
I did, yes. So we don't support the old style floating form designer anymore, but the main reason for using the floating form designer that we had via feedback was often for people with very large forms. So they wanted to be able to design that. Now with the designer currently now in version 11, you can put that in its own window. So there's very minimal Chrome around it. Like perhaps a title bar and a status bar or something. But that's about it. So you can design with a very large form. Just put that on another monitor and have that entire screen dedicated to it. The other thing is for VCL form designing, given that you can change the DPI that you design at, you can effectively use that to have a kind of zoom. Like, it's not intended for that, but you can achieve it that way. So if you design on a high DPI monitor, so you have a second screen that's 4K, for example, but you set the IDE to design 96 DPI, you can fit twice the size of your screen in every dimension, on that form designer. Or you can just have a normal high-res display and just fit a large form there. So the new functionality of really just being able to sort of pull the designer from place to place and put it wherever you want really should help with that.
Okay, Marco, does the T-ribbon control, does it support the new high DPI rendering and styles?
That's not a component that's part of our product, and we ship with the product. So I honestly not sure.
Okay. Stephen Ball just pointed out that you need to have a late 2013 MacBook Pro or newer, so a MacBook Pro from the last 8 years, it sounds like, should still work. The Windows 11, I found out my desktop's too old for Windows 11, so I have to get a new desktop because they're requiring the 9th gen Intel CPUs or newer. David, any comments, or does the Twine compile and boost work with RAD Studio 11, C++ Builder 11?
Yes, so Twine compile is third-party extension, should be out in Get It soon. Boost as well, we have on our servers. It's been handed over to the engineer who puts it up on Get It. I'm not certain if it's there right yet, but it will be very soon.
And Stephen pointed out that if you're still using the BDE, now it's a great time to use Refind and upgrade to FireDAC, and you can certainly use SQLite or IB Lite or IB to go or any number, interbase, full interbase, whatever. There are lots of options there. Actually, so yeah, you can, the FireDAC is so amazing. I just want to, every time FireDAC comes up, I just want to talk about how awesome FireDAC is. Is the Visual Studio Code extension available now, or is it going to be available later today or soon?
Yes, in fact, a couple of minutes ago, just as I saw the news that everything had been made live, you might have seen my webcam just vanish for a minute. That was when I went off to another screen and clicked publish on the marketplace. It's available now. So install version 11, and then once you have version 11 installed, you can test that out. I saw a related question there actually, which is, can you use the VS Code extension with 10.4.2 rather than with version 11? And the answer is no, for a couple of reasons, all of them technical. So the first was that LSP protocol is an open protocol, and we wanted to make sure that we follow that exactly. So there are a couple of tweaks there that we made in version 11 to make sure that it does that. But obviously those aren't in 10.4.2's version. And the second thing is that the LSP server needs to be aware of the whole sort of project context. Things like, what paths do you search in, and that kind of thing. Where should it pass? What other files should you be aware of? The whole bunch of different settings like that. Now, there's no standardized way with LSP to communicate that. So what we've done is that the RAD Studio IDE itself, when you open a project, there's a checkbox that you can turn on in the IDE options that will generate the LSP config. And so you'll have a little JSON file generated alongside your project file that contains that kind of key information. And then the LSP server will read that. Now, that's obviously only generated in 10.5, but also the Delphi LSP server that we ship with version 11, not 10.5, sorry. That's obviously only generated in version 11, but also the Delphi LSP server that we ship in version 11 is what reads and understands that. So you do need version 11's Delphi LSP to be able to use it outside of the IDE with another editor.
So someone commented about using interweb.
Might be interested in some of the technical reasons there. Sorry, Jim, go ahead.
No, that was good, actually. There was a comment, though, about using interweb for web development. There have been updates to interweb. Actually, we've done some webinars with Chad over interweb showing off some of the stuff they've developed and some of the stuff that's coming soon. So there's a lot of good options for web development out there. Has anybody tried to install RAD Studio 11 on Windows 7? It's not officially supported, Are the Abrevia components available in Gedit? If I believe they are. If they're not, they will be shortly.
I think they are, but not all of the TurboPack items. So they're coming.
Yeah.
Just on the IDE in Windows 7 note, just to clarify, we only support installing the IDE on Windows 10. We can still target. You can build an app that runs on Windows
7. Where can they find more information on RAD Server Lite? Probably be in the doc wiki. Will FireDAC? Oh, sorry, scrolled out of the way. Will FireDAC support the new Microsoft SQL Server driver, not the old, instead of using the old provider?
That's something I would need to check. I'm not certain about it. Sorry.
So, David, as for the Visual Studio Code LSP extension, so you need to have both RAD 11 and Visual Studio Code installed on the same machine to use that. Is that correct?
Yes, you install Delphi, and then part of that installation includes everything that you need. In terms of the LSP server, and then on Visual Studio Code you will install the extension separately. It will automatically pick up the location of the Delphi LSP server when you have Delphi installed.
Okay. Marco, does RAD or FireDAC support the latest version of SQLite? And does it support encryption?
That's a tricky question because you can have both at the same time. So long story short, and I might expand it on a blog post shortly. The most recent version of SQLite has dropped an API that we and many others were using to do encryption. And the reason is relatively simple, because the company behind SQLite, which is an open source product but has one company behind it, not like a community. The company behind SQLite is started selling the encrypted version. It's called SQLite EE, the version with full encryption of SQLite. That's not a free distributable. It's a relatively cheap solution, but it's a paid solution. So we basically had two options. One is to move to the latest version, but drop encryption, or stay on the current version, which is the last with encryption. It's not all, but it has a few months. The last with encryption. Now consider that there are two ways you can bundle SQLite with a FireMonkey application. One is to use the compiled file and link those into the application, effectively bundling it in the single exe. In that case, you need to use the bits that we provide. The second option is to use a DLL, and you are free to use any version of SQLite. You can compile your own SQLite, whether it's the one with encryption or without. So you can use any of the combinations. And that's available today. It's been available for a little time, the ability to use a DLL-based version of SQLite. So if you want to use the DLL version, you're open, you can choose. If you want to use the embedded version, we are going to provide support for the latest version without encryption, and encryption is a plugin. We're going to support the ability to use SQLite EE. There should actually be a unit in the product that allows you to switch that support. In the future, we might also have the option to move to the latest version without encryption. But the scenario is fairly tricky. And again, it's totally outside of our control, because we are respecting the license and we're expecting our customers also to respect the license that the company behind SQLite is requiring. So again, there was a change on their side. They're trying to monetize some of the effort, understandable, but reality is that this is causing some hiccups in our model, which was adding a custom encryption layer on top of the free library.
Wow. Okay. Just scrolling here, I lost what I was going to ask next.
No, I am totally lost on the question. I mean, it's just like.
I'm like, okay, I'll ask this one next, and then I'm typing answers.
Yeah. No, we thank you very much. We'll try to follow up. Feel free to email myself, David, Jim, anytime, any day. We'll not answer to everyone today, but we'll answer. So if anything we missed, I mean, make sure that gets to our attention in some other means. But yeah, answering a few hundred questions in an hour, and we've already been answering for a full hour.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So there's a few people saying that they're having some license issues during installation, but the other people are saying that they've installed fine. So I don't know the details on that yet. I would suggest, so check and make sure you can visit the license website. I think it's license.embarcadero.com. I was talking to someone the other day that was having some DNS issues and couldn't resolve that, and that's why they're getting license issues. But if you might also check to make sure if there's a new key available through my.embarcadero.com. If not, if you're still having trouble after trying those two things, then I would guess contact support. I'm not sure why some people would be having trouble, other people not.
Yeah, the other option is wait 24 hours. We'll check it. Again in this meeting, so we haven't been able to, and we can certainly blog or follow our social media. If there is information or anything you might have to do, we'll provide an update. In most cases, the license has auto update mechanism, so just by opening the license manager and hitting update, you might get new bits in terms of the license from us. But again, we don't know exactly what's the issue and how many people are affected. So sorry for that.
Oh, wow, man, I keep thinking, okay, we're making progress, and then I scroll some more. I was like, I don't know. DocWiki's not updated yet. They're pushing updates to it. It looks like now. That's probably why you might not be responding. So there's a lot happening. So I know you're all eager to get a hold of it, and I said it's available for download, but it looks like there may be some things they're resolving. So give it a little time, as Marco said, maybe 24 hours, and hopefully things will get working here. But wow, this has been great. Someone was asking if we're seeing growth in Delphi. I would say yes. So the two big indicators I look for is MVPs, getting new MVPs and MVP activity, and I've certainly seen a lot of that lately. And then amount of questions and attendance for webinars, launch webinars like this, and those have also been going up. So, oh, Marco, why did you choose the name Alexandria?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So we started with Mount Olympus for the beta, and we have been considering Athens or other cities. But at some point, we had also this idea that we hit over the last five years all of the other continents, say for Africa, because we had North America with Seattle, we had Berlin, which was Europe, we had Tokyo, Rio, Sydney, which are each on a separate continent. So we thought, hey, why not pick a place in Africa? And we had like a lot of debate about different options, Cape Town and a bunch of others. But then one of the idea that really stuck was the idea that, well, first, Alexandria is a very nice name. It's easy to, well, relatively easy to spell and pronounce. But also it is the site of the best library of the ancient time. And this somehow has a connection to the fact that we do offer certainly the best library for Windows of the, if you want to call it ancient, I mean, pre.NET, pre-WinRT time. But hey, Microsoft is doing a U-turn and now saying that native compile applications are first-class citizen on Windows 11, and with the Windows App SDK is focused on old-style application, if you want to call them, the application that keeps working and running across the years, That's the way I prefer putting them. The other nice thing that Alexandria recently, I don't know exactly when, but is now hosting a huge and very nice, from the architectural point of view, modern time library. Maybe we can assign that to FireMonkey. It's hard to tell. So it's the location of a great ancient library. It's the location of a great modern library. And libraries are one of the added values to RAD Studio and C++ Builder customers. And so that was a nice angle to underline, and one of the reasons for picking that city name.
Very cool. Yeah, and someone else also pointed out that all of the cities we've picked have had large towers in them, and Alexandria was also the site of the lighthouse, great lighthouse as well. So I don't know if they still have a large tower. I know, so there are a lot of people suggesting other cities. Hard to say what the future cities will be. Hard to say for sure. I still am pushing for Boise. Android's Work Manager API. So not all the APIs are imported by default, but there is the tool for importing additional APIs, and there's a lot of APIs available on GitHub as well that have been pre-imported. So if it's not there, it may be available on GitHub. Don't know offhand. Apparently, FMX T-Grid doesn't work with Elevate DB datasets because they don't return a record position number. I've not heard about that as being an issue. I know DevExpress has been invited to the beta as well, but Elevate has been invited to the beta, and I've not heard anything about that. So, yeah, I'll have to follow up with them, and then they can certainly reach out to us if there's something we can do to help them with that. Okay. Pros and different installers. Should they use the ISO versus the ESD installer, Marco? Does it make a difference which installer they use?
No, it doesn't make a big difference. We tend to recommend using the online installer, the ESD installer. You're going to end up downloading fewer bits because you're downloading only the bits that you're actually installing, and you can download other bits over time freely. It's a nice experience. We have really made it significantly faster. You get parallel downloads and parallel downloading and unzipping and a few other things. It's generally faster to use the online installer than the static one, which is a bit counter. It goes a bit around the logic because you say, hey, I already have all of the bits installed on my local machine. It should be so much faster. It takes a little time to find the right bits in that gigantic file. So at the end of the day, online is faster. It's more tested, although both are part of our test, and it's somehow the recommendation. But both are available, so pick the approach you prefer, and go for it. And both are available also in the silent mode. That's asking you fewer questions and things. We've added the language selection back to the initial portion of the installer. And we also added the ability to pick a folder. If you're using the online, it downloads a lot of files into your public catalog repository folder, but now you can pick a different place than public documents, Embarcadero catalog repository. You can put on a slow, less used drive or some place you don't care too much about, and it will not pollute your documents folder with installation files.
Okay, so let's go ahead and wrap up. I'm not going to scroll again, otherwise I'll find more questions. I know there's more questions here, but we do need to wrap up.
We need to stop, yes, because we're almost starting the new one.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so thank you everybody for coming out and joining us. I'm seeing lots of people said they're installing right now and they're excited. That's great to see. Certainly see a lot of. It's always good to see a lot of excitement. We're going to look into some licensing issues, and I actually just sent some messages about it just a minute ago. So fantastic, great to see everybody here. Thank you, Marco and David, for all the hard work you put into this version, and thank you everybody else for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, and thanks everyone as well. And just on the note of having so many questions, it's fantastic to see so much feedback and interest and questions. I know we have to stop because it's been a bit longer than an hour, but we would keep going if we could. But it's really gratifying, I think, to have this, this kind of interest and the love for Delphi and C++ Builder that you sort of see coming through. So yeah, even though we have to end it now, we really appreciate you attending and all the feedback and questions and interests that we see on screen.
Yeah. So I will save off all the questions and share them with product management. But if there is a bug, a couple people are like, is this bug fixed? Please report it in Quality Portal. Product management reads them, and that's how they decide what gets fixed. So if it's not reported, it's probably not fixed. So please report it. Don't assume somebody else has. And that is the best way to get feedback about things you'd like to see changed and fixed and such. So David, for Visual Studio Code, does it require, how does that work? Does it require a license? Does it have to be on the same machine? Can you debug? Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. So the VS Code support is really a bit of an experiment for us, I think. We're just interested to see how you like it and what the response is. To sort of judge where to go from there. It only supports things like, well, it's a code editor support only is I think the answer to your question. It supports syntax highlighting and code insight through Delphi LSP. We don't support compiling or debugging through VS Code in this extension. We've got a few questions about that, and it's interesting to see the interest there. I think it'd be great if you can test it out and then send us an email and let us know what you think of it and how you'd like it to be developed in future.
Yeah, I'm sure I believe on the Visual Studio Code extension, you can see the number of downloads and the reviews. And if we see a lot of downloads and some good feedback on there, then that'll certainly be a good metric that more should be done.
Well, I haven't looked since I actually published it myself during the previous webinar, and I haven't looked since then when there was exactly one download, which was me. And I know that because I was testing the extension. But it seems to be, like, from the feedback that we've got from the previous webinar and the questions here, is something that's really getting a lot of interest. I didn't answer one part of your question. I'm sorry about that because it's quite late at night here and I'm tired and I'm missing things. You asked about installation. Yes, you need to install Delphi on the same machine, and then you can use Visual Studio Code.
Yeah, there were a few people that were like,
install the extension. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, what's that?
I was just saying, as well as installing Delphi, then you need to also go to the Visual Studio Marketplace to install the Delphi LSP extension.
Okay, I just checked and there are 16 downloads now.
All right.
So, since people are still downloading and installing, it's still good, but let's see. Marco, if you build a program, can you still build a program that will run on Windows XP?
That's a question we're getting way too often. Yes, technically you can run an application built with RAD Studio 11 to target XP. You might have to tweak one of the PE flags, the executable flags, because we are indicating it's a newer version, so they might not be compatible, but that's only a flag to put in your linker options. And of course, any of the new features we added over recent years, I mean, there's no per monitor v2, there's no high DPI, there's no support for the WinRT APIs and a bunch of the other new features. But if you stay away from those specific features, it should be working properly, and it should still be possible to target XP with an application.
Okay. Oh, the downloads are going up. All right, I'll stop refreshing. David, in addition to the LSP being available for Visual Studio Code, were there other LSP issues fixed in from 10.4.2 to 11?
Yes, so like the LSP support that we did this release was not really feature-based, other than having the VS Code plugin, which obviously is a feature. It was all quality work. So we fixed a lot of issues. One of the nice things about Delphi LSP is that we've built it to generate very detailed log files. So whenever we get a bug report in Delphi LSP, we ask for the log files, and info on how to generate those is in the doc wiki on the Code Insight reference page. And that has let us fix things very well. So we found that 10.4.2, the vast majority of people had it working very well. Some people had it sometimes give errors. It was unable to provide completion or something like that. And we narrowed down the core reasons why it was doing that and fixed those. So that work has been done in version 11, and should be great for almost everyone now, I think.
So the there's some people commenting in doc wiki that they can't get there. Apparently when they're updating, something went wrong on the server. They're working on that right now. And if you have trouble with installing it, if you update your license, so go into License Manager, which you can click the Advanced button, or go into your existing Delphi Help License Manager and hit Update. That seems to be fixing it. They're working on it, and maybe it's already fixed and no one's having trouble anymore, but it's been a morning.
Actually, put the instructions, Marco sent them to me. Actually, it was just me who copy pasted them into the chat about the license fix.
Yeah, but I've seen people complaining that the steps don't work, but specifically pointing out to the special free DevRel edition. So those steps apply to the general license with a base subscription. They will not apply to other special licenses. Those we have to double check.
So if you're for DevRel licenses, none of them were working. Now some of them are working, and then some people are getting a totally different error now. So it's been an interesting day. There's a comment here, a question about Visual Assist integration, if that's still something that we can look forward to.
Oh, very much.
David.
No, that's been on the roadmap for a while, and we really want that. It's not in version 11.0, unfortunately, but we know there's keen interest from you, and there's definitely keen interest from us. We're working on it right now.
Great. Marco, Android API 30 support, does that mean 30 is the minimum requirement? Because that's really new, or will it still work on older versions of Android?
No, we have tested it on older version of Android, starting with 8.1, which is the minimum we are officially supporting. Although we've seen report of people using also Android 6 as a target. The API version is just something you declare saying that you are compatible, and it is a must-have to be on the Play Store. So not that you can do much around it if you want to be available there. Now, this is a configuration you can change. You can download a different SDK and NDK and configure it differently, although it's not trivial, it is fully doable. But also notice that there is a different parameter, which is the minimum required version. This is not the same as the SDK, because there is some backwards compatibility. So if you target a newer SDK, but you're not calling any new API that wasn't available earlier, then you get a good level of compatibility. It's a bit weird, but it's Android versioning is a bit weird in itself.
It's the API versus SDK. I get confused too.
Yeah. What about SDK? There are like 5 different things, and the Java version and whatever. So.
What about iOS 15 support, which is coming soon? Do we have support for that yet?
No, we never announced support for something that's not released. So we don't have officially support for Windows 11 or new macOS or Android, but we do extensive testing. Although at times the beta versions that we're targeting show issues that don't depend on us, and they eventually get fixed in newer betas. But we do monitor them, and in some cases we do have to release updates, and we've generally done that fairly promptly after the operating system has become available.
Yes, if there was a beta that did not have a confidentiality agreement on it, then I'm sure we would be telling you we were on it and testing things. But since there is confidentiality agreements, if there was a beta, then we can't really say anything.
Yeah, the only platform that's a little more open in that respect is Microsoft. Although we regularly see things like changing a bit between build and build. And of course, they are releasing 2 operating systems in the next few months. They're releasing Windows 11 and a new version of Windows 10, like a few weeks apart, which is interesting. Let's put it that way. And I mean, we regularly have people who install and test, but not that we can test every single feature of the product on every operating system. That is really complex.
Yeah, and like you said, it does change. It happens quite often that things change dramatically at compile time or release time.
Yeah, generally for the better. At time, I mean, occasionally for the worse. So sometimes we test on the betas, everything great. Hey, we're happy, and then last minute, oh, there is a release. Hey, that got broken. And it does happen. But there isn't much we can do. I mean, we are getting the developers beta that any developer gets. We don't have like a special agreement with any of the platform vendors.
So someone commented that they were building apps running them on XP, but they couldn't get runtime packages to work. Interesting. So apparently there are a few things missing from GitIt. We're still working on that, like the low-code wizards are missing from GitIt. There are others coming. Will Twine, Compile, and Boost work with 11, David?
Yes, so Boost is being put on GitIt right now. It might even be there by now. Twine Compile should be there soon.
What about, David, split screen in the editor?
We've actually got quite a few questions about that today, which is surprising. It is a feature that we'd like to have. So we've been focusing on things like high DPI and being able to support the form designer in multiple windows and that kind of thing first, especially because that was a use case for the old floating form designer. We want to make sure that people who use that are still able to achieve what they need. But now we've done that, I think, I don't promise a particular version, but things like split screen editing are the kind of thing we have been researching and looking into, and definitely something that would be really nice to add.
For Marco, for RAD Server Lite, what sort of limits are there for that? And how do people get it?
So the RAD Server Lite itself you get it with the product. It uses the same exact binary of the developer version, the standalone indie-based developer version of RAD Server. The difference is that it can use embedded version of Interbase, namely Interbase to go. That implies that you get encryption, which is a good thing. Now, to obtain a license, which is not actually, well, it's a slip file, so it's a file that you deploy with your application that activates the license. There would be 2 steps to do. You'll need to redeem your license key. I mean, get a key with a license key and then get the slip file. That's something that's been tested, and probably we should test it thoroughly given some of the licenses issues today, and should be available really in the next few days. In terms of limitation, the limitations are more structural. I mean, we haven't added any limitation like on purpose or by design or anything like that. But the fact that it uses in the HTTP server implies that it's not the same bandwidth of using Apache or IIS and a module installed in those. The other limitation is that because it uses IB2Go, it has a limit on number of threads you can and connections you can do to the database at the same time. I mean, database is embedded, and so we have implemented in some scenarios, a bit of serialization. So requests are processed in sequence rather than fully in parallel to avoid like trashing the database. That implies that if you have if you're testing a deployment, that's perfect. You can push it on a Docker or on a container, on any place that. And again, you don't need to go any step for licensing. That's going to work fine. But also, if you are, for example, at like a shop is hosting a solution, has like a few customers around the shop that needs to check information. I mean, when you have like 10 people not hitting like the service desperately, it's probably going to survive and provide good response. So for small scale scenarios, we expect it to be fully sufficient. It also depends on the code you're writing, because if you have like massive operations, that might not fit. But the good thing is that then everything you have built and deployed, I mean, the same exact DLL and so forth, will work with a full-blown RAD server. So if you need to scale up, you get one free server deployment with Enterprise. You get unlimited with Architect. You can go for this other type of deployment, which is more complicated because it requires integration with the web server, requires a registering a license, requires deploying a full-blown interface. We do have an installer, but it's the deployment complexity is really much more significant. RAD Serverlite is just a bunch of files you put in a folder and you're good to go.
A few people wishing Marco late happy birthday.
Oh, thanks.
David, a question about, was it Clang Tidy? I lost it now, as far as being able to use a tidy with the code formatter.
I'm not sure. I've been solving the questions myself. You probably see me leaning forward here. And I didn't see that question. We haven't tested Clang Tidy, but you can definitely give it a go. I will need to look at it before I can give a more detailed answer. The main issue with that kind of thing is where we have language extensions like property or closure or something which you might not understand. But in code that doesn't use those extensions, then it should be fine. For the binaries that we ship, like Clang format, we've actually added support in for our language extensions. So Clang format can handle our property extension, for example.
If a few people asking about specific bugs, if you do have a specific bug, we'll post a list of fixed bugs. If you have an issue number, if you don't have an issue number, please report it so that it can be tracked and potentially fixed. There's a comment here about metal performance on Mac OS, if that improved. I'm not sure if there's a specific bug related to that, or
we have solved a few issues on metal performance. Not everything that was on the table. So yeah, I need to track the specific issue. Also, we have seen in a couple of cases that metal fails on with some specific coding style, which is not really like the standard/recommended coding style. So at least in one case, we have provided a workaround that solved the issue that the developer was experiencing. But that was more of a crash than a slowdown, if I remember. Because I mean, having worked like I mean, is it thousands of issues? It's hard to remember really all of them.
There is someone's asking if we have a page that explains Android APIs. We do on the doc wiki, but it's down right now. Otherwise, I give you the link for it. But it's platform statuses on there that explains what versions are supported and such. Some questions about reporting. Fast Reports is available for FireMonkey. I'm not sure if they have Linux or not, but you can go out to their website and find out more. David, which version of Clang ships with C++ Builder 11?
Version 5. We still ship version 5, although some of our tech, like the debugger, is based on LLVM 12. So yeah, sort of a mix of versions at the moment.
All right. Sorry, I'm trying to scroll through and see which ones we've not answered yet. A Twine compiler. Oh, that's interesting. Is there something similar to Twine compiler for Delphi? Is that possible, or is there something out there that maybe they're not aware of?
There is not that I'm aware of. Marco, do you know of any sort of compile accelerators, parallel building for Delphi?
No, not that I know, and partially it's because Delphi has a different design in terms of architecture. I mean, Delphi does not compile each Pascal file in kind of almost isolation like the C++ compiler does. That's not even true. I mean, the C++ compiler does pre-compilation and a bunch of tricks to accelerate. But Delphi inherently, when there are dependencies among units, compiles the unit in a specific sequence and doesn't read the source code file of the unit it uses like a header file. It just uses the DCU symbols, and that's way faster. So the compiler is generally very fast. However, because of the complex dependency graph, to do anything in parallel, you'll need to find units that are independent or depend only on the same set of shared units, come up with a sequence, and then you might be able to have like 20–30% of compilation in parallel, but probably not that much, not much more. And also because we are caching the DCUs in memory, then you have, of course, different threads conflicting, because if multiple threads need to read and write the same cache, you can get some trouble. We have been investigating a bit, but it is a fairly complex issue. Now, you could compile two projects in a project group in parallel, but again, they might leverage some shared code. So certainly at the project group level, it is possible and thinkable to have some significant parallelism, but within a single project, it is doable. I mean, everything is, but it would be a huge effort and might offer a limited gain.
I'm asking how many downloads. Don't know how many downloads are right now. A lot. I think everybody during the last session, as soon as it came available, was downloading it. Can you run both Delphi 11 and 10.4.2 on the same machine, Marco?
Yes, absolutely. We recommend installing in sequence and not reverse, so install 10.4.2 first. You probably already have it. And you can bring it on the same machine. It will use the same license, well, supposedly, at least. And you don't need to re-register or do anything. It should, I mean, if everything works as expected, it should find your license on your machine and just work. The two can coexist. The only caveat is that if you open a form in, I mean, when you open a project, and specifically when you open a form, a DFM, in 11, depending on your configurations and settings, the high DPI settings and others, it might get some change. And then when you go back, you might experience hiccup in the same source code file. Again, not Pascal source file, those are fine, but DFMs or project configuration and other artifacts are moved back and forth because there is an upgrade process that is not always easy to obvious to revert.
Okay, that's good. Improvement, have there been improvements to the math library?
No, the improvements to the math library that were on the roadmap have not been delivered. We have decided, well, over quite a few months ago, that there were a couple of other priorities. We pushed some of that effort to improve the compiler performance, the Delphi compiler performance, which is significantly higher. I mean, it was in 10.4.2 with the patches. We've inched a bit better, but that was a significant development that took place kind of at the time we were supposed to working on the new release. And also it took a little extra effort to get everything ready for macOS ARM, which is the new platform we added to Delphi this cycle.
Is RAD Studio 11 compatible with DCUs compiled on 10.4.2?
Nope. No DCU and no BPL compatibility if they were built with the previous version.
So there's a few questions about HTTPS 2 or HTTP 2 and new OpenSSL and TLS standards. Marco, is the HTTP 2, is that available for DataSnap as well, or just RAD server? Or?
No, it's not really. We've implemented it client-side technology. When you're thinking about servers, again, RAD server is generally deployed as a DLL into Apache or IIS, and the core features like encryption, security, and so forth are all managed by the web server that is hosting the RAD server module. So, and for in the standalone, I don't think that support is actually available, although I haven't checked. We have implemented the client side of it, but I don't think there is a specific DataSnap support. I mean, in the native DataSnap client tooling. It is available for REST and HTTP general calls.
Does RAD server work with other databases? What databases does it work with?
So RAD server uses an internal database, which is really not accessible to you as a developer, for storing system information, users, and a lot of other things. Now, the same RAD server, I mean, your application, your code, can decide to use Interbase or use any other database. You'll still need a license in some scenarios. I mean, not solely for the embedded one, but for the standalone. But that's separate. So RAD server has a RAD server database, if you want to call it, that is technically Interbase, or from this release in RAD server Lite, Interbase to go. But in terms of where you store your application data, that's anything you can access with FireDuck or with third-party tools or any other solution. There is the ability within RAD server to save name value pairs, but I would not really call it a database in itself.
And you can actually do RAD server with no database at all if you wanted to.
Oh, absolutely.
So if you're having trouble with installing licensing, if you go to the advanced from the license screen or your existing install, go to Help, License Manager, click Update, and then that should fix it. If it doesn't, then contact support, I believe, at this point. Did someone put that in the chat window? The detailed instructions. So if someone just bought RAD Studio Architect a few weeks ago, do they get a free upgrade to 11?
License of what? RAD Studio?
If they bought RAD Studio Architect a few weeks ago, do they get an upgrade to 11?
Yeah, of course. I mean, if they bought Architect a few weeks ago, they have at least 1 year of a basic subscription license. That is going to cover this release and probably and most likely another update in the year cycle. I know there was even some discount offer offering like 2 extra months, so 14 months rather than 12, but that might be a specific offer that was floating around. But in general, because a basic subscription is required, it's not an optional. If you bought a new license later than September 9th, 2020, you will have the right to install RAD 11. Now, of course, if you got it on September last year, we recommend you continue paying the subscription and you get further updates. I mean, 11.1 or whatever we're going to release in the future.
If there are other licensing questions, sales would be who to talk to on that. And if you're having, or as far as changing your license or upgrading or renewing and such, beyond that, if you're still having trouble installing, support can help you with that. Okay, let me scroll down here and see. What about memory management in Delphi 11? How well does a multi-threaded application or service scale? Marco, were there any changes around memory management and threading specifically to Delphi 11?
Not really much. There was one small change that been requested by customer, which is exposing the stats from the parallel library thread pool engine, so you can figure out what is happening within the system without hacking it, because it's now a visible property. Other than that, we're still relying on FastMM4. We don't have a current plan to move to ship FastMM5, simply because that's not an open source library, but it's a very sophisticated and library worth the cost if you're doing heavy parallel programming. But it's managed by a separate individual, Pierre Lariche, and it has a complex license. Read the license and check it. We are not going to replace our runtime library, our FastMM4 in the RTL anytime soon. We are considering using FastMM5 internally for some of our tools, because again, it's worth spending the money for the license when you're building an application that needs a heavy parallelism.
Yeah, from people I've talked to, they said that FastMM5 does address a number of issues in 4 and has some advantages, but for a lot of general purpose applications, 4 is probably a better solution for you. So it really depends on your scenario.
Yeah, it does. And honestly, the first thing I would recommend, I'm all in favor of, FastMM has been a complete rewrite from scratch. It's been a huge development effort, and the entire community should be thankful for the work that was done. But also consider that the regular FastMM4 has a number of settings. If you download the full version and configure it, that might already offer a significant improvement on heavy parallel scenarios. You can configure a lot of the synchronization mechanisms in that library that do make a difference. Again, something we have done internally. We have changed some of our configurations, for example, in RAD server, and gained a significant performance just by tweaking FastMM4. But of course, in a server-side heavy multi-threaded application, I'm certain FastMM5 would provide an advantage.
David, so you showed the rendering the new icons and toolbars, stuff like that. Does the high DPI support extend into the code editor as well for the font rendering? Is it going to look sharper in high DPI?
Oh yes, very much. So it's across the entire IDE. In fact, although nice and crisp icons are very nice, I personally think the biggest benefit actually is in the code editor. I've been using this obviously internally for quite a while now, and with the new font that we added as well, Consolus, I don't know how to pronounce it. It looks wonderful in the code editor in high DPI. So
yeah,
short answer is across the entire IDE.
I started using that now, and I'm really aware of any programs I have that are not high DPI. Now it's like, oh, I can't use this. How about font ligature support?
Not yet. I would really like that in the code editor. In fact, there are quite a few things I'd like us to improve and change in the code editor. But focusing on things like high DPI first, or better sort of multi-window support, especially for form designing, whatever sort of came first. To get ligature support, we actually need to change the technology that we use to draw text. You need, I think it's Direct2D, in order to get ligature support for fonts. So that's something we'll look at. I don't have a promise for a particular release, but I know I'd certainly like to have that and a few other improvements as well.
Someone's commenting that is there a way to disable live bindings by pressing F12 immediately or something, if I'm understanding the question correctly? It's not something I'm aware of.
I'm not sure I understand the question well enough, sorry.
Yeah, well, yeah, I don't either, because it said live bindings, disable live bindings in Delphi 7 with F12, and that wasn't an option. So, live bindings didn't exist in Delphi 7. Sorry. All right, I'm just scrolling back up through here to see if there's other questions we've missed. Some of them we didn't type answers to, but I think we got answered in other questions. So if I've missed your question, it's not something personal here. A C++ debugger, David. Has there been improvements or changes around C++ debugger for Clang?
Yeah, there definitely have been improvements. I mean, you know, these webinars have like a sort of a light overview of the top area of things, and yeah, we've done quite a bit of bug fixing and tweaks in that. You'll have to dig into the bug fixes to see exactly what, but there are certainly improvements.
How about Firebird 4? Is that supported in FireDAC? Marco?
I think FireDAC is compatible. I don't think we've implemented any specific new feature of the database, but application should work against it. I know we added one specific Firebird configuration change that might be related with Firebird 4, but I'm not certain. Maybe it was for a different release. I could check out DocWiki, but it's not online.
So actually, one thing I've noticed is that so we had the LSP feature come in, which is a big update on fixed number of things, and now we have the high DPI. I see a lot of these changes happening, improving the IDE overall. The form designer, detached form designer you were showing, David, is a great thing. I appreciate that, because I think for a while people have been saying that the IDE hasn't been in need of an update, but it certainly has come a long way, and I think we're have more improvements in that space coming in the near future. So that is great to see. Go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was just saying it's good to get that feedback. Thank you.
Yeah. I was on Reddit the other day, and someone commented about Delphi saying something, and I'm like, have you used Delphi in the last 5 years? Because it doesn't sound like you have. There's a lot has changed recently, and sometimes when we're using it from day to day, maybe we don't notice it as much. But I am really thrilled. The high DPI. If you don't have a high DPI monitor, get a high DPI monitor with Delphi 11 or RAD Studio 11. You will be blown away. It looks amazing. Which SQLite is the new FireDAC using? So there was a question about this earlier too, Marco, about some of the nuances about changes in SQLite and FireDAC.
Yeah, I can repeat what I explained earlier. So we had a request to update FireDAC support to the latest version of SQLite, and we are doing it only to some at some point. So what we are doing is we are supporting the last version that maintains support for custom encryption code, which FireDAC provides. So we want to keep supporting encryption for SQLite, which is done through a custom hook to the database when you embed it and build it into your executable. however, what happened is that over the last year, the company behind SQLite has decided to remove that opportunity for encryption, because at the same time they are promoting a SQLite EE version that has built-in encryption support. So if we were to move to the latest version of SQLite, we'll completely lose the ability to offer encryption. So right now, what we do is we have built-in is the last version without encryption. We are providing, and if the documentation is not clear enough, we'll expand it. We are providing a ways to use the SQLite EE version instead, always built into. The other thing that's very important is that since 10.4, FARDAC allows you to indicate, to link, to keep SQLite as an external DLL. So that means you can compile or build any version of SQLite you want and ship that DLL with your application. So you can decide which version you are onto by using the linked library rather than the embedded version.
Okay. All right. I think we're got most of the questions here. Oh wait, why does CQuery, David? Why does CQuery for C++ consume memory every time it generates a list? Does it cache the list of generated lists?
Sure. So CQuery is the LSP server for C++. It is an open source product. So, I mean, the answer to why it uses a lot of memory generating a list is deep inside its design. It's not something we've built. The cache question is interesting. Like the CQuery server itself does cache some information. The IDE doesn't by design, because LSP is meant to query the server every time. So it's the server's responsibility to always give results. So really, and this is kind of a non-answer, I know, but sort of just have to hand over to that's how CQuery was built.
And CMake as well. There have been improvements to CMake. Can you describe that?
They have. Most of those have just been sort of quality improvements or tweaks. Your improvements in handling how we understand particular directives, or testing with particular open source libraries and making sure that it understands that kind of thing. So no new sort of big features in what CMake supports, just sort of general more stuff works better kind of improvements. That's not a very specific answer, I'm afraid, but it's sort of like the best general description I can give without going into some super detailed, there's this particular aspect of this that we've got to fix.
Okay. A few people saying, wow, great, thanks, good answers. A few suggestions for SVG components. There's a new one called Skia for Delphi. That's a new library that I've been playing with that I think has got a great SVG support, but there's lots of great things out there for sure. All right, good. I think we're good.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to say there are quite a few SVG components out there actually, and at least one that hooks up to the new virtual image list system.
Yes,
I'm not sure.
TMS has one that does that. Yes.
Oh, does it really? I have a feeling there's an open source one as well. I'm really not sure, but I know that we get quite a few questions sometimes because our virtual image list and image collection uses raster images, multiple sizes of raster images. But there are SVG solutions out there if you want to use vector images instead. So,
all right.
Check those out.
Sorry if my Skype is chiming through the system here. I'm tracking a bunch of other things at the same time and thought it was fixed. But anyway, great. All right, so thank you. I will give product management a copy of the questions here. So if there were things that we weren't able to get to, hopefully they'll have a chance to deal with that, and maybe we can do a blog post with it. Binding to style elements in FireMonkey. I'm not sure. Live binding to style elements? Does anybody know what that might? I'm not sure what that's in reference to.
I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I'm not sure. You also when you get RAD Studio, you do have support tickets that you can use to get an engineer to help you with specific scenarios as well, or put in feature requests through Quality Portal. Just tried to install, and I do not have a license for it. So, Mike, you may need to run the update license manager and hit update, or check your my.embarcadero.com for a new license key. All right.
Just on the note of license issues, I have a Skype chat open as well. You're probably the same one as you, Jim. We saw the license issues are also affecting the Delphi LSP in VS Code at the moment, but apparently that has just been fixed about a minute ago. So if you're using the Visual Studio Code extension and getting a license error, then you can do the same update step for your license through License Manager, and it should work.
Okay. All right. So Steven says set a style book and you can swap that over quickly rather than live binding. Okay, an answer to that question. Okay, we need to go. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Marco and David, for being here, answering so many questions, and for all the work you put into the new release.
Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
There's been a huge number of questions. This is the second webinar of, I think there are 3 around the world. This is the second one so far, and a huge number of questions in both. We really appreciate that. It's always fantastic to see the interest.
Yes, it is. Yep, it's great. All right. Excellent. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you all online. So Greg's asking, when is RAD Studio Delphi C++ Builder 11 released? Today. Now. Another question about Community Edition. So we just released Community Edition 10.4.2, and there will be a Community Edition 11, but it's not available now. It'll be available later. There'll be some delay there. Malcolm, do you have a high DPI screen? Have you got a chance to check out the RAD 11 on high DPI yet?
Yeah, so one of my screens is high DPI, and the other, I've got 3. The other 2 aren't, and so one of playing with the, and I'm going to get this wrong, but is it the DPI per screen V2? Is that how you say it? Playing with that now as you drag a form from one screen to another and having those live changes. And being able to do that not just with your app, but with the IDE itself. So at the form designer level, that's actually something I'm tackling right now with one of our projects. And so this is perfect timing. You've lined it up just right for me.
Fantastic. I actually just got a high DPI monitor, and using Delphi in high DPI mode, I'm like, I don't know that I could ever use anything else. It looks so nice and so clean and so crisp. So, yeah. And then the previewing VCL styles in the designer, it makes it so much easier just to know what your app's going to look like at design time, which is something I've always loved about Delphi.
Yeah, on the high DPI thing, I kind of didn't care until one of the other apps that I use an awful lot was using it. And then suddenly I needed every one of my apps to use it. And that's partly what's driving us to update some of our projects, is because now that another app that we use, and then now the Delphi IDE itself is nice and crisp and clean, suddenly everything else looks so rubbish. And we have to, now we're going to go back and fix everything else.
Yep. So there's a question here about WSDL support for multi-part. And I used to do a lot with WSDL, but I haven't in a long time. Do we have multi-part support in there for WSDL?
I'm the same in that, I was going to say 5 years ago, but maybe it's more. But whenever I was doing more SOAP work, this was probably something I could just answer off the top of my head, but I don't know now.
Yeah, I would go look in DocWiki, but it's down right now, unfortunately, so can't really say. So a few people commented about license issues installing. There's been license issues. I've been working on most of the morning. I thought most of them were resolved, but apparently some people still are in trouble. Sorry. I will. I've sent some emails and messages. I'll send some more after this. We finish here and see what I can find out what's going on. There's still a few things being worked on. It's amazing how much work and prep goes into these releases, but there's always stuff that happens. And I know that before I worked at Embarcadero, I didn't realize I had no idea the magnitude of what goes into these. But yes, so yeah, it's amazing. All right, so actually there's a question here to see the improved FireMonkey GUI design elements. I'll just share my screen here and show you because it's pretty cool. Change presenter, or no, here's the thing, share. All right, so there is the IDE, and I'm in a FireMonkey application. So I'll put down a button, and my system just all of a sudden started running really slow. I'm probably doing too many things at once. All right, so I have 3 buttons here. And so first of all, I have the hint on the button telling me information about the button. And then when I'm dragging it, see it has little lines that it locks up. It clicks right there, so it clicks together. And same thing when you're resizing. It clicks and has the lineups to help you get everything lined up nice and neat. And then also the spacing, so when you get too close, it stops you. And you can configure some of that in the settings as well. Herbert says, I guess I'll have to buy a new 4K monitor. They've gotten really reasonably priced as well. I'm like, I need a second 4K monitor. There's a question here about refactoring for C++. There is some refactoring for C++, but they're also on the roadmap working on the Visual Assist integration still is planned in the near future for C++ as well. So there'll be some more updates around that.
So Jim, did you see David I is in the chat window and just answered, sorry, not in the Q&A window, and just answered the WSDL multi-part question for us.
Oh, thank you, David. Hey, David. That's awesome. I think David was on the other 2 as well. So
power through it all, just lots of coffee.
Use the wizard to import WSDL document or XML schema that describes a web. The WSDL importer generates wrapper classes for multi-part SOAP messages. Okay, great. Thank you very much, David. So I showed an example of the GUI design elements in FireMonkey. High-res icons.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things that I actually didn't look at very much during the beta, and this presentation just now reminded me of it, is the RAD server Lite piece. How much do you know about that? I mean, that looks potentially like it could be a really cool thing for ISVs, really lightweight way to sort of deploy REST-based applications and scale from something that's all on one machine, but still REST-based, all the way through to, you know, sticking RAD server in AWS or Azure or something.
Yeah. So my understanding is the RAD server Lite is it's basically like a deployable version of the one that you use for debugging from the IDE, in that it's a standalone. It doesn't require installing into IIS or Apache, and so it lets you run your RAD server modules without having to install them into Apache or IIS. So it's kind of halfway there, right? And so it's light in that it's easier to deploy, and for some scenarios that might be exactly what you need. But it does give you that ability to scale up, as you were talking about, though, really.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice story. Like if you build something on, like until now, deciding to build something on RAD server basically meant even if you were deploying on site somewhere, you'd have all of this requirement, all these dependencies on Apache or IIS or blah, blah, blah. But now you can still have that single install on a single machine and use RAD server modules, and then, you know, potentially step up to sticking it on, you know, on a machine on the LAN, or sticking it on a server in the cloud or whatever, and the RAD server modules don't change.
Yeah, exactly. And so as far as, there is not any kind of limitation on sessions or anything like that from a external point of view, but you're going to get better performance with the deployment into IIS and Apache. So you know, you're going to have some limitations from that regard. But again, it depends, right? If that might be exactly what you need for your scenario, and so now it's an option available for you. We had some customers that were asking for that specifically, so it's good that they were able to put that together and make that work.
Yeah.
So Herbert was just talking about getting a new 4K monitor, and I jokingly said get two, but I was talking to one of the MVPs, and he actually got rid of his 2 monitors and got one really big high DPI monitor. And I realize that now, as I have a high DPI monitor and then another good sized monitor, that it's too much. I can't see all of it. So there's something to be said for getting one good monitor.
What you need to do is sit further back. So get a couch or something and a wireless keyboard, and you can sit back about 10 foot away from your huge 4K monitor.
Yeah. Well, my dad just got a huge OLED TV. That would be perfect for that. Although I have, unfortunately, the problem, I've been nearsighted my whole life, and now that I'm in my 40s, I am now getting a little bit of that farsightedness you get, which means everything in here I'm fine without glasses, but once it gets beyond arm's reach, I can't see it without my glasses, and if I put my glasses on, then I can't see anything in this range here. So I will reference counting for objects return. I don't think so. There are options as far as how to do that. You can use the managed records to create a smart pointer in Delphi. There also, I know some people use alternative memory managers that have reference counting in there, and there's other things you can do to do that. But as far as I know, there's no plans to bring back reference counting for objects as the de facto standard on there. So another question about Community Edition. There is not a plan. There is a Community Edition 11 planned, but it is not immediate. If you're wanting, right now we just released 10.4.2 Community Edition. There will be an 11 Community Edition, but it will be further down the road. Can RAD Studio 11 coexist with 10? Yes, it can. They are not. They are whole versions different, and they. And they're not DCU compatible either, is the other thing, so that they're different releases. Peter says high DPI widescreens work really well when you run multiple VMs, so convenient. So true. There is a what is it called? Power Toys had a thing where you could set up these regions on your windows where you could maximize a window in a region. And so if you had a big monitor, you could just say, this is one window, this is another window, this is another window. But that's a feature built into Windows 11. Currently have 2 27-inch monitors, used to have 3, but realized I never used a third. Yeah, exactly. Bruce says different tasks on different monitors, for sure.
Maybe Embarcadero should start reselling 4K monitors, because it sounds like we're drumming up a bit of business here.
Yeah. There was a question about Windows 11 on ARM, or Windows supporting Windows on ARM. That currently is a research task on the roadmap. It's not something we have a release assigned to, but I am pushing for it a lot, Windows and ARM Linux. And Marco alluded to the fact that ARM is really getting big, especially Apple really made a big leap forward in that. So I think it's possible there might be some more reconsiderations about that. I'm hoping. I keep pushing for it. I would love to see that. And I honestly think ARM is getting bigger faster than people expected to do in the near future.
Well, and I have to say, I was super skeptical of Apple moving to ARM, but honestly, they seem to have done. You know, I'm no Apple fanboy, but they seem to have done such a good job of it. Like in terms of the, you know, even Intel-based Mac apps run so well in that emulator on ARM, like performance-wise, like crazy well. It shouldn't run that well. So if Windows can do that sort of job on ARM, then I'm on board. So
actually, it is I shared my screen a second ago. I'm on a M1 Mac, and that was in a virtual machine running Windows 11 ARM on an ARM CPU, and it all works. And the slowdown, honestly, I think it's because I've got some things going on in the background. Usually, it's just brilliant and looks great. When I got the M1 Mac, I became very aware of how slow my Windows computer was. New roadmap. That there probably will be a new roadmap at some point in the future. I don't know. I haven't heard any news about when that's going to be, but I would suspect it seems like there's probably time to get one in the near future. So Judd's asking, can the installation of 11 get your options from 10.4? There is the migration tool that will migrate your preferences, but then somebody also just commenting that they said migrate everything, and they had a couple messages popping up. Some things didn't migrate right. So you can migrate, but you do need to put a little bit of a thought into what you're migrating and how.
Yeah, we've heard that, not specifically with 11, but just in general from people that, you know, the migration wizard actually does what it says it's going to do, but it's really important that you understand what it says it's going to do first. So just blindly saying migrate everything may not be what you want.
Yep. What I've done, and I don't know this is the best practice, but I will say back up everything, and then I'll install the new one, and then when I go, it's like, oh, this isn't working, then I'll go and import just that one setting, right? Just go in and find the one thing I want, and then import it, and then, okay, that's working the way I want it to. And kind of just take this piecemeal, when I notice something's broken approach. New free add-ons for subscription customers. I don't know that there's any new ones. There are updates to some of them, and there may be some in the works that are coming. That's something we're trying to do more of, figure out what to do to put in there for update subscription customers. So Brian says, considering upgrading, what can I tell them about the new version can do for their GUI? Okay, so if you're as far as I alluded to this earlier, the fact that you can preview your styles in the IDE, you can preview the high DPI in the IDE, and really have a better understanding of what your app's going to look like at runtime with all that built into it, it makes it easier to build a nicer looking application. So it's gonna give you more control over that. You know, it's it's like, if you remember, I don't know if you were working in the old WordPerfect for DOS, you know, you kind of had to guess what your document was going to look like because you just had a text view. But then once you move to the GUI where you actually can see it more, you got a better idea what your application looks like. It's kind of like that sort of change, really, the what you're getting here now, in my opinion. Maybe not quite that extreme, but it feels like it when you look at those old. As you bring up an old app that doesn't have high DPI, it's like, oh, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, there's changes in the VCL and that sort of thing, but for me, the last few releases have had improvements for high DPI, but it was always, I always held off because it was just hard. You had to run it, and you know, it was all code, and you had to run it and see what was changed, and then stop it and go back and make an adjustment and run it again. With it now in the form designer, so you can just see it straight away. No, that cycle of make a change, what's it look like, is now just reduced down to nothing. That's what makes me go, okay, now I'll do high DPI.
Yep. So the the new Visual Studio VS Code LSP is a new feature. Lets you use have a lightweight IDE you can use occasionally for some things. It has some cool features in it. That's kind of cool. It doesn't have any of the debugging or compiling support in it yet, but I suspect there's a way that you could figure out how to have it call the command line compilers and compile from there. I know. Actually, I will look at that as well, but it is I'm sure it will happen.
Yeah.
But so it's kind of an experiment, David was saying. So depending on the feedback, how much people use it and find it useful, will determine whether there'll be more investment in expanding that in the near future. The TRichEdit, so it uses the new spell check feature and such, uses the Windows functionality, the functionality built into the operating system. And so whether it supports other languages or whatever depends on the underlying Windows system. It should support other languages and other character sets and such. But again, that's going to come from Windows. We haven't tested every language, but I believe they have tested some of them. New code samples for Delphi 11. So Don, I will be posting some in the near future online. I have a few demos that I've been using for some of the samples you saw there, including the one with the turning the rounded corners on and off. That was something people were asking about early on, if they could do that. And I'm like, well, I thought it was a cool feature, but sure, we'll figure it out. So it's not that complicated, just a little bit of code for that that's necessary. Maybe it'll be included in the future release, I don't know. Let's see. I don't have any update on the C++ roadmap changes for like Android 64-bit and stuff. Maybe when we see an updated roadmap, we'll have an idea of what's going on there. New current PC requirements for the new IDE. I think there was a change, but I don't think it was very significant, and I don't have the requirements offhand. There should be on the website. It should be there someplace, and it definitely will be in the doc wiki once it's back online. Judd's asking about a bug in int64 overflow. I couldn't tell you without the issue number, and I don't have that list of fixed issues yet. So look up the issue number, Judd, and then once the list of fixed issues is published, probably tomorrow, then you can check it there to see if it's been fixed or not. What problems I'm most likely to have upgrading a Delphi 6 application or 7 application? Depends. So well, there's three things really that it comes down to. If you're using BDE, you need to migrate off BDE. There is actually the BDE release for 11 something broke. There was BDE in 10.4.2. We had it as a separate download, but it's been deprecated, not supported for a while. So if you're using BDE, get off of BDE. We have a tool called Refine that makes it easy to make that migration. And we have a migration center on the website that can help you with that. So that's the first one if your data access components need to change. The second one is if you have other third-party libraries that you don't have the source code for, that you can't migrate and there's no new version for, there are things you can do like adapter patterns to adapt different libraries in there and stuff like that. But generally, there's a lot of third parties, tech partners like DevExpress and TMS that have new versions of their components that work with Delphi 11. So you could use that. Then the other two are Unicode and 64-bit. So if you're wanting to go just to 32-bit, you don't have to worry about 64-bit, but you might as well start doing 64-bit. But Unicode is a big deal in that in Delphi 7, we still pretended like it was a Latin language world, and it's not. It's a multi-character set world. Unicode has been part of the standard for Windows for quite a while, and Delphi changed so that it's based on Unicode now. So you do, the biggest thing is if you have any place that you treat a string or a character as binary data, right? So if you're trying to use it like it's binary and not a string of actual characters, that can bite you, because the difference with Unicode is not single byte per character anymore. It's now multi-byte characters. So that could be the place you could get hit. There are some, like I said, some guides in the Migration Center on the website, Embarcadero website, under resources. Most people I've talked to have said that it wasn't as painful as they'd worried, but depending on the size of your application and what you've done in your application, it can vary from person to person. Yeah. You're nodding your head a lot, Malcolm. Anything you want to, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, going into, like, we do a lot of these for customers, and going into it early on, I was really worried about Unicode. But it's the third-party component one that bites us the most. Some old component that doesn't exist anymore. Sometimes those things are, you know, like things that are used maybe in one form, like to you know, talk to a scanner or something like that. They're not so bad, but it's when they're user interface controls that appear on every single form in the application, that's where it gets painful. The Unicode thing, it exists, but most stuff just comes across, you know, and even in a single application, you know, most of the changes you don't even notice. But then, as you say, if like one we did recently was an application where they were talking to an FPOS terminal, and that communication was all using strings as if they were arrays of bytes and not arrays of characters, which is the fundamental difference. And they were using strings as if they were just you know, consecutive bytes. That's where some changes had to happen. But just concatenating strings and pulling a string from a database and putting it back or showing it on the screen, that just happens automatically.
Yep. Yeah. There's a lot of, that's, for most people I've talked to, that's been my experience as well, is you honestly, pretty quickly, you start to pick up on the smells, and you start to pick up pretty quick, and you're like, oh, I know what this one is, I can fix that one, and you can fix them pretty quick. So yeah. I can type up some of that as well, just so it's there. Let's see.
There's been a few things come up about with the high DPI support and like in previous releases, the virtual image list and this sort of stuff. There's been a few things come up in here about creating icons and all the different sizes you need to create, and whether there are icon libraries already you can use.
There was a tool, and I'm trying to find it now. Let me look. That would generate all the icons and splash screens in one click. So you would give it one size, and then it would generate them all for you. Although the TMS has a vector-based T-image list as well. That is pretty cool. That you can give it. You can put an SVG in there, and it will then generate. You use that with the virtual image list, and then it will generate all the sizes you need and look great.
Yeah. I mean, I've used, I use still the icon generator, which is an Axialis product, which is pretty good, but I am kind of open to a better solution if there is one.
So I found one here, but the link is broken. I know I've seen a few, because a few times I've been like, it would be so great. Someone's like, oh, here it is. I'm like, oh my goodness, I couldn't find it. So we need to figure that out. Maybe we can get something added to get it for that. So there's a couple things people point out are missing to get it. They're adding some more things in. Most stuff should be updated on Get It soon, hopefully. Was it Axialis?
Yeah, I'm just finding a link to the one that I use.
Okay. Are there any plans to make Delphi 64-bit native compiler and toolchain for Linux available in Community Edition soon? Not likely. It's possible it'll get there eventually, but it's not probably going to be in the near future. I wouldn't hold my breath on that one. Brian is saying, I find that re-importing components by hand after installing a new Delphi IDE tends to work the best. Yeah, sometimes there's like some side effects that you don't get otherwise. The migration wizard or migration tool helps with the a lot of your configuration. But yeah, I think for components, usually you wanted to install them yourself. Oops, I thought I was typing in the box, but apparently not.
Actually,
thanks for putting the link in there.
We should, David, you should be on the screen, mate. David's just put in a link to a bunch of tools for generating application icons, different sizes, that kind of stuff. So that's also in the, I assume people can see all of these questions, is that right?
Yes, they can see once we answer them, then they can see the question and the answer, although they don't usually see who said them.
Okay.
Are we going to adopt tie-dye shirts or what? Actually, I do have a tie-dye shirt. I should wear it more often. I didn't realize that someone pointed out that I have the David I beard going now.
Is that just I don't know, maybe you're not in lockdown. I've got my lockdown beard going on, but that's just tardiness, not necessarily on purpose.
Actually, so I started growing it, and then I shaved it off, and then lockdown happened, and then I grew it back. And I've decided I'm keeping it now. On the topic of resizable graphics, using FireMonkey, I wrote a component that allows you to use a subset of EPS specification for creating graphics. That's cool. Working across multiple resolutions and using different devices, it saves a ton of time to use one graphic and resize it as needed. Yes, that's great. There's a new library called a Skia for Delphi. Let me put a link in for that. Skia for Delphi. I think that's how you pronounce it. Skia.org Skia is a 2D graphics library that Google developed. It's open source, and it's what's used by Flutter and also used in Chrome, Chrome and Firefox and Chrome OS. A number of other things use Skia. It's really catching on quickly, and a couple developers from Brazil, I believe, made a Skia for Delphi that, oh, I put it in the wrong spot, that is a adapted version of that is a vector graphics library and it works across all platforms. And it supports SVGs, and it supports Lottie files, which Lottie files are a new animation format that was developed by Airbnb of all people. That is it's based on Adobe After Effects, if I remember correctly. It's like a special subset converted of Adobe After Effects. So if someone goes into After Effects and draws a vector animation, it'll export it out and then render it beautifully. It just looks great. And so there's a number of places that are using this in apps. It's big in Flutter, like I said, and this Skia for Delphi, I had some Lottie animations that I thought were great, and it's like I'd love to be able to do these in Delphi. And I saw this, and I'm like, oh, I wonder. I just threw them in there, and so interestingly, I just tried to do it with Python, and Python rendered it wrong. It got the Z order of the objects messed up in a couple places, and I loaded it in Skia for Delphi, and it rendered and just looked beautifully on the first try. And I'm like, that's pretty cool. So I'm a big fan. They're still working on it. I think they have their first release out, but I've been talking to the developers, and we actually, Embarcadero sponsored them because they're doing some awesome work. And I'm expecting to see a lot of great new things out of this. So someone says I'm Delphi Web, and I'm trying to get my hands on recent examples of building a REST server with SSL certificate. What should I look for? Great tutorials. So Peter, there's a few things there. First of all, if you are, it depends on how you're trying to use SSL certificates, first of all. If you just are wanting to secure the pipe, then if you install either DataSnap or RAD server, or actually there's a number of other web broker-based frameworks out there, into IIS or Apache, and then on IIS or Apache, install the SSL certificates, then that encrypts your tunnel for you automatically. But there's other things you can do with SSL. For like example, you can use SSL to validate who's connecting. You might be using self-signed certificates or something like that. And for that, there is the open SSL libraries that are available, I believe, as part of Indy, are one place you can go, and then Secure Black Box is another place that has some other stuff that goes beyond that. But that, depending on where you're at in the process of trying to find it, you could look at some of the RAD server examples. We have some demos we've done before with RAD server or DataSnap around that, or you can find that in DocWiki or maybe on our YouTube channel. So Brian's asking, does Skia use any DLLs or is it native to Delphi? So both. So what they did is they took the Skia library that's from Google and they modified it so that it's easier to interface with from Delphi, because there's some assumptions made in the way the interfaces are made. And so you can deploy the library across platforms, Android, iOS, etc., or you can embed it into, you can link it into your application as well. So you can do it either way. They've made it that way. So if you go to the GitHub repository, there's a link that takes you out to where they have their Skia library as well, and they have details on how to link it in as well. So these guys have honestly, take a look at this if you're excited about it. My understanding, it's two young guys in Brazil that wanted a good library for this, and they're like, we'll just build it ourselves. And they've been working really, really hard on it and making a lot of great progress. So reach out to them, tell them you appreciate it, sponsor them maybe. But yeah, I'm really excited about it. It looks really, really cool. They are currently at CPU rendered. I don't know if they have the GPU rendering done yet, but they're working on GPU rendering, which is, again, really exciting. Very cool stuff. Is DataSnap robust enough to use on public internet? Yes, it is. Now, and people are using it on that, but you can write poorly scaling DataSnap easier than you, I mean, you can write bad code in anything, but there are things you need to think about if you want to make an application scale properly. So it depends on your user load, how the users are connecting, what that user sessions look like, and stuff like that. But you can certainly get there with DataSnap. It's really powerful. I've talked to people that have millions and millions of sessions a day going through DataSnap, and they're happy with it. They love it. Where can I download Delphi 11 for my subscription? It's my.embarcadero.com. I'll put a link in there for you. If you currently have update subscription, if you don't, if you go to embarcadero.com, you can find the trial download link.
We wrote an article because we get this question all the time from people. So we wrote an article. I've just put a link in the chat window that walks you through how to find your serial, how to find the ISO or the installer, what to do if you can't log in, stuff.
Fantastic. We need more of those. Yeah, awesome. I'm sure it's a communication breakdown on our part, and we need to do better about that. But yeah, the nice thing about Skia is that you can export PDF. I used it from Python and intend to use it from Delphi. Yeah, you can, and they have a demo on the GitHub that shows how to render to a PDF and stuff. So there's a lot of things that are Flutter's big, and it's like the secret sauce of Flutter is the Skia library, really. And so it's like, here, let's take the stuff that's cool about Flutter and give it to Delphi developers. And so if you looked at Flutter and like, that looks kind of cool, but it's like Delphi with more steps, well, guess what? Now you can do it all with Delphi too. Awesome. All right. Well, I think I could sit here and chat for hours, but we probably ought to wrap up. I think we've gotten through a lot of these questions already. Either typed answers or addressed them in other ways. Oh, there's some more from David. Oh, DocWiki's back working. Yay. So DocWiki's back online, apparently, according to David. Thank you, David. Oh, it is. Look at that. They don't have Alexandria on it yet, but they do have the Sydney is back. So that's good. Excellent. So I use DocWiki so much. So often, I can't tell you how many times I've been on a webinar. Well, the funniest thing is when I go to look for something and I find a YouTube video of a webinar I did on the topic, and I'm like, what? I knew how to do this at one point. But no, I use DocWiki all the time. How suitable is Delphi for UWP? Can I inherit from external UWP class to build new UWP classes? And can I manage WinMD as easy as Delphi 7 manages TLB? I know there is a UWP bridge that Delphi has, and there's been a number of times that I've been like, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and make this UWP thing work. And it was like, oh, that was a lot easier than I expected it to be. So there's a number of things that they've done that actually make it easier to work with UWP in Delphi than in Microsoft Visual C++. That being said, I don't know on the specific scenario you're talking about managing WinMD as easily as Delphi 7 managed TLBs, because Delphi 7 did make TLBs easy to work with. That is true. But I haven't done managing WinMDs, but I do know that the bridge is, every time I've expected trouble, it's been easier to work with than I expected it to be. Have you done much with UWPs and Delphi, recent versions of Delphi?
No, I know how to spell it, but that's about it.
Yeah. It's actually a really big deal, because in Windows Vista, well, Windows Vista was supposed to be something different than it was, and Microsoft said when Windows Vista was coming that everything was going to be managed code. There was no native code. You're going to have to go move to managed code. And Windows Vista then wasn't what it was going to be, and then Microsoft still like, it's all managed code. But then in Windows, well, it was starting to happen a little bit in Windows 8, but then Windows 10, it was a really big return to native code being important, and that's a really big theme in Windows 11 now as well. So it's a lot easier to work with stuff. As a Delphi developer, we're in a really good place right now, to be honest, that Microsoft is doing a lot to make things more accessible to us, and we've got this incredible ecosystem as well. So the Project Reunion Marco mentioned as well, which is where we get some of the new functionality. And for example, the web browser update comes from that. There's other things coming in down that pipe as well that are going to really improve things. So Peter's asking, if code insight stops and the IDE stops, is there a method of kicking it back into action? So actually, in 10.4.2, because they moved to the LSP, which is out of process for that, you could kick it and get going again. In 11, it does that automatically. If it locks up, it restarts itself automatically. So I don't know the particular scenario you're talking about, but you should see a big improvement in 11, especially depending on what version you're coming from.
Yeah, sorry, Jim. You might just want to clarify that. I mean, it's not that the IDE restarts itself.
Right. Yes. Yeah, Thank you.
It restarts the LSP process if it notices that it's not responding. But yeah, I haven't tried it. I haven't had the issue in this beta, but I know when the prior beta, when LSP was sort of being first introduced, I know if you killed the LSP process, it would pop up again, and you're good to go, kind of. So I haven't tried that with 11.
Yeah. So I haven't had it happen in 11, but in 11, one of the new features is that it's supposed to, if it notices it locks up, it's supposed to restart it the LSP automatically, which means you're in the IDE and it just keeps working.
Yeah.
Funny story, back in Delphi 6, I had a third-party component that I had to use for a project that kept causing the IDE to crash. And so I wrote my own IDE add-in that would detect the crash, save my work, and relaunch the IDE whenever that happened. Instead of fixing the problem, I made a really good Band-Aid. It was enough to get the project done. That's what I needed. Okay.
Solutions are built on Band-Aids, mate. They're Band-Aids all the way down.
Exactly. Well, and that's actually one of the things that I love about Delphi, actually, is that Delphi makes it really easy to prototype that application, and get the basic functionality, that 80% mark done, but then you don't have to throw it out to get the rest of the way. You just can take it and finish it off. So, yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And thanks, Malcolm, for joining me. So I'm not on here by myself talking to myself.
No worries, mate.
And good luck, everybody, in checking out RAD 11. It's I really like it. I'm excited about it. I've got some good feedback from everybody, too. I know we're having some licensing problems, but I hope they'll have those resolved very quickly here.
And can I just say, if there's people who are who've enjoyed the webinar and they don't really feel like rolling back into work now and they want to keep watching more interesting technical Delphi-related topics, then the ADUG, the Australian Delphi User Group Symposium, is on right now, actually. I'm missing one of the sessions right now. So I'm going to roll straight from this into watching the ADUG sessions. I'll put a link in the chat window. But you don't have to be an ADUG member to join in, and there's prizes and everything, and it is a paid event, but it's super inexpensive. So
I should do that too. I know I've been up too long already, but
what's another 8
that
hours?
sounds like, yeah. Oh, Marco's speaking there, and Dave Nottage. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to a few of them actually. Dave's Castry session should be really interesting.
Castry, I was actually just talking to Dave about Castry, and I said, the problem with Castry is it's everything in the kitchen sink, and you're like, okay, I don't know that I need that. But then when you're like, I need this, and it's like, oh, it's in Castry. You're like, oh, why didn't you tell me?
Yeah.
There's everything that you need is in Castry. It's one of those does everything. So I was suggesting he needs to make it more visible what's in there. So he's working on that. But yeah, Castry is really cool.
The problem with all of these things. Like I've done this with my libraries. I go, okay, this one, it's just going to be the pieces I need. And then 6 months later, it's 4 million pieces, and it's exactly what I was trying to avoid. So.
Yeah, so true. Oh, all right. I got to figure out what time these are and be attending some of these.
Yeah, so it's for the schedule that's on that website is the same time zone as me, and right now it's almost 10:30 a.m. So we've missed the first session. Okay. But
Castry's next 15 minutes. I will be on there. All right, cool. Thank you for reminding. That's awesome. Appreciate that. Yeah.
So it's going to be, well, I was going to say it's not going to be a very productive day for me. It is, because I'm going to learn heaps. But yeah.
This is like getting a book, though, is that if you don't read the entire book, if you're like one page in the book that's like, oh, that answers the thing then it's worth it. It's worth the time, it's worth the money, it's all worth it. And that's a really reasonable price too. So yeah. Awesome. Cool. Great. Well, thank you. It's good seeing everybody. Take care.
See you guys.
Enjoy this. Bye, everybody.